You do not lose your calm because people are difficult, you lose it because you let their behavior govern your mind. Every day you face voices that interrupt you, dismiss you, or misunderstand you, and in those moments your judgment decides whether you remain free or become controlled. Right now you may feel tired of reacting too fast, thinking too much, and regretting words you could not take back. This is the exact place Stoic discipline begins, where you stop handing your inner life to external behavior and start governing it with reason alone. If you want to train this strength with others who are doing the same, subscribe and stay here with this practice of inner control, because nothing here is about opinion, it is about mastery of the mind. What follows will show you how to stand unchanged when others are not. Number 1. Master your judgments before confronting difficult people every day. The man who cannot govern his judgments will be ruled by every loud voice he meets. He will enter a room already defeated. He will hear a tone, assume insult. He will see a face, assume contempt. He will receive a delay, assume disrespect. Then his blood will rise, his thoughts will narrow, and he will call that reaction strength. It is not strength, it is surrender. It is the mind handing the keys of the soul to the nearest stranger and calling it fate. Begin there, because this is where most people live and never admit it. They do not suffer first from difficult people. They suffer first from their own judgments about difficult people. That is the wound. That is the real source of the fire. Look carefully at your own life. How many times have you been disturbed, not by the event itself, but by the story you told yourself about it? A person cuts you off and you say, "He has disrespected me." A co-worker speaks sharply and you say, "She wants to humiliate me." A relative ignores your message and you say, "They do not value me." You may believe these judgments instantly and call them obvious, but obvious to whom? To a mind that has not paused, examined and tested itself. The first duty is not to react better. The first duty is to think better. A disciplined life begins when you stop treating every impression as truth. Not every thought deserves your allegiance. Not every feeling deserves your obedience. Not every insult deserves your attention. The soul that rushes to judgment becomes a slave to appearances. The soul that examines appearances becomes free. When you meet an insufferable person, do not begin by asking how to win. Ask what in you has been touched. Ask what belief has been awakened. Ask what part of your pride is demanding tribute. Many things look like anger on the outside, but are actually vanity on the inside. You wanted to be admired. You wanted to be understood instantly. You wanted your comfort protected. You wanted the other person to behave as if your peace mattered to them more than it matters to you. That is the error. Your peace is your work. No one else has been assigned that duty. To demand that others keep you calm is to confess that you have not learnt self-governance. The wise person does not wait for a better world before acting with reason. The wise person brings reason into an unreasoning world and refuses to be dragged down by it. This is why judgment must be mastered before confrontation. A rash mind is never a just mind. It sees only its injury and ignores its own role in magnifying it. The moment you are provoked, your mind begins a trial. There is an accusation, and then there is a sentence. The question is whether you will act as judge or merely as the defendant's outrage. If you do not set yourself apart from the first surge of emotion, you will mistake motion for wisdom. But the soul that can say, "This is merely an impression, not yet a verdict," has already taken the first step toward freedom. Train yourself to do this in the ordinary hours, not only in the storm. In the morning, before the world touches you, remind yourself that you will meet arrogance, vanity, laziness, deceit, impatience, and ingratitude. Do not say this to become bitter. Say it to become ready. The same city that contains honest work also contains foolish speech. The same family that contains affection also contains tension. The same street that holds peace also holds noise. If you expect none of this, you are a child of fantasy. If you expect it and prepare your mind, you are a student of reason. Rise each morning and ask, what judgments will try to rule me today? Which of my wounds will be tempted to speak first? Which desire will insist that I must be treated well before I can behave well? That question alone begins to strip away vanity. The difficult person is not your commander. They are your examiner. They reveal whether your principles are alive or merely spoken. They show you whether you possess discipline or only preference. They are unpleasant, yes, but not powerful in the way your fear makes them powerful. Their words can shake your body. Their behavior can interrupt your plans. Their mood can darken an hour. But they cannot force you to abandon virtue unless you first consent. That is the boundary that must be kept clear in your mind. What belongs to you is judgment, choice, intention, refusal, and the use you make of the present moment. What does not belong to you is their character, their mood, their manners, their fairness, or their insight. The wise person does not confuse these two realms. The foolish person lives as though the world were required to arrange itself according to his comfort. You must become honest about anger. Anger feels noble when you are inside it, because it tells you that you are defending yourself. But often you are not defending your character. You are defending your ego. You are defending the image you want others to have of you. You are defending the fantasy that life should not be difficult. Anger says, I should not have to tolerate this. Reason says, you will have to tolerate much and still remain good. Anger says, I deserve better treatment. Reason says, your worth is not increased by praise nor reduced by rudeness. Anger says, this insult must be answered now. Reason says, pause and see whether the insult actually harms anything essential. If your virtue remains intact, then you have not been damaged in the only way that matters. If your virtue has been compromised by your own reaction, then the injury began with you. This is not weakness, it is precision. A surgeon does not swing wildly because he is offended by the illness. He works carefully because the work matters. In the same way, the mind must be careful with impressions because its work is serious. When someone provokes you, there is a tiny moment between impression and response. That moment is the battlefield. In that space, everything turns. If you rush through it, you belong to impulse. If you inhabit it, you belong to reason. Train that space. It begins with the breath, not because breathing itself is magical, but because the pause interrupts the tyrant of impulse. When a harsh remark lands, do not answer at once. Stop, let the body settle. Ask yourself, what exactly happened? What was said? What was intended? What do I actually know? What am I assuming? What response would keep my character clean? This is not hesitation born of fear. It is discipline born of self-respect. You will discover that many conflicts become smaller when viewed through honest judgment. The person you called insufferable may simply be thoughtless. The person who annoyed you may be unwell. The person who ignored you may be preoccupied. The one who spoke sharply may be suffering from their own private disorder. You are not required to excuse everything, but you are required to see clearly. Clear sight weakens resentment. Resentment thrives in guesses. It feeds on the worst interpretation. It wants the other person to become a monster so that your own anger can feel justified. Refuse this poison. Look directly at the facts and nothing more. Tell yourself only what you know. The rest is fiction, and fiction, when it governs action, becomes self-harm. There is also another truth that must be spoken plainly. Some people will not become easier. Some will remain rude, careless, loud, manipulative, insecure, and exhausting. You do not control their progress. You do not control whether they grow. You do not control whether they ever reflect on themselves. If your peace depends on their reform, you have chosen a fragile life. A stable mind does not tie its well-being to the moral education of others. It does what is right within its own reach and leaves the rest. This is where the doctrine of control becomes living truth. Separate what is yours from what is not yours. Your judgments are yours. Your words are yours. Your posture is yours. Your restraint is yours. Their choices are theirs. Their failures are theirs. Their offense is theirs. Do not confuse these realms, or you will spend your life arguing with shadows. Now understand what it means to confront a difficult person well. It does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean allowing evil behavior to continue unchecked. It does not mean swallowing every insult and pretending it is virtue to be mistreated. That is not Stoic discipline. That is cowardice dressed as humility. Reason may require you to speak firmly. Reason may require you to set a boundary. Reason may require you to leave a place. Reason may require you to refuse cooperation. But reason never requires you to become inwardly corrupted. You may correct someone without hatred. You may oppose someone without losing your temper. You may protect yourself without becoming cruel. That is the standard, not softness, not revenge, not theatrical composure, just clean judgment and measured action. Before you speak, ask whether your words serve virtue or merely appetite. Does this reply aim at truth, justice, self-control and courage, or does it aim at humiliation? A person who can wound and then call it honesty has not yet learned to govern his tongue. The tongue is a small instrument, but it reveals a large soul. Many claim to speak bluntly when in truth they simply enjoy release. They say whatever rises in them and call that authenticity. But authenticity without discipline is only the rawness of impulse. The wise person speaks as one who is responsible for the effect of words, not only their speed. This is why silence is often stronger than reaction. Silence can be a form of mastery when it protects reason from being dragged into the mud. Silence says, I am not obliged to answer every provocation with equal force. Silence says, I am watching my own mind. Silence says, I will not rush to defend pride that was never worth defending. There is a practice here that must be used every day. When you sense irritation rising, name it without adorning it. Say inwardly, anger is appearing, not, I am anger. Not, this person has made me angry in a way beyond my control. Say, anger is appearing. That small distance matters. It reminds you that you are not identical to the movement passing through you. You are the one who can observe it, question it, and refuse it. Repeat this until the mind stops confusing sensation with command. Then ask, what would the best use of this moment look like? Not the easiest. Not the most satisfying to the ego. The best, often the best use is calm speech. Sometimes it is silence, sometimes it is departure, sometimes it is a simple correction, but always it is chosen, never dragged out of you by impulse. You must also practice voluntary discomfort if you wish to remain unshaken by difficult people. This does not mean seeking drama. It means training yourself not to panic when comfort is removed. Spend time without unnecessary noise. Eat simply at times. Sit without reaching for distraction whenever irritation appears. Allow yourself to feel the slight discomfort of not responding immediately. Let the body learn that restraint is not danger. A mind that is pampered by constant comfort becomes brittle under pressure. A mind that has trained itself to endure small unease will not collapse when another person behaves badly. This is how inner strength is built, not in theory, but in repeated refusals to obey every craving for ease. Reflect, too, on the vanity hidden inside your annoyance. Often you are disturbed because someone failed to recognize your dignity. But your dignity does not come from recognition. It comes from the quality of your choices. If a fool does not see your worth, that does not diminish it. If a rude person speaks carelessly, that does not stain your character. If a manipulator tries to provoke you, that does not mean you must enter their game. Their blindness is theirs. Your task is to remain upright, even when unnoticed. The person who needs constant acknowledgement is not free. He is dependent on applause, and applause is a thin reed. It breaks easily. A virtuous life does not need the crowd to certify it. This is the hardest point for many people because they want justice to mean emotional compensation. They want the world to hurt them less than it does. They want others to know they were wronged. Sometimes that may happen, often it will not. You may never receive the apology you think would complete the matter. You may never receive the respect you think was owed. You may never receive the correction of the record. Learn this now, not later. Your peace cannot be postponed until other people become fair. You must choose peace before fairness arrives, or perhaps before it ever arrives. This is not resignation. It is the freedom that comes when you stop bargaining with reality. Examine how much of your suffering comes from saying, "This should not be happening to me." That sentence is a furnace. It burns the present because it resents the present. The Stoic answer is not that the event is good in itself. The answer is that your response can still be good. The situation may be unpleasant. The person may be unfair. The day may be ruined in certain respects, but even there, virtue is still available. Calm is still available. Justice is still available. Self-command is still available. The good man is not the one to whom nothing unpleasant happens. He is the one who remains good inside unpleasantness. That is the real test. Many want the peace of the wise without the discipline of the wise. They want to be unbothered but not examined. They want calm but not correction. They want control but not responsibility. They want the reward without the work. Strip away this childishness. A disciplined mind is not born from wishing. It is built through repeated self-correction. Each day you will fail in small ways. You will react too fast. You will say a sharper word than was necessary. You will rehearse a grievance in private. You will feed a resentment. Do not turn these failures into identity. Use them as material. When the day ends, review it honestly. Where did I lose command? Where did I assume insult? Where did I choose pride over reason? Where did I speak without need? Where did I stay silent when virtue required firmness? Write it down if you must. Look at yourself without theatrics. The point of evening review is not shame. The point is improvement. A person who cannot face his own errors will repeat them with greater confidence. In the middle of the day, when irritation grows, return to the central question. What is truly up to me here? Not what do I wish were up to me, not what would make me feel better. What is actually mine to govern? Usually it is smaller than the ego wants and greater than fear admits. It is your interpretation, it is your next sentence, it is your face, it is your willingness to remain just, it is your refusal to retaliate in spirit even when you must defend yourself in action. The mind loves to wander into the field of other people's flaws because it is easier than working on itself. Bring it back. Every time it wanders, bring it back. That returning is the work. You will notice that some difficult people are especially dangerous because they can make you feel morally superior while corrupting you in the process. They are loud, foolish, self-important, and easy to despise. Be careful. Contempt is a hidden vice. It pretends to be clarity, but often it is just anger wearing a polished mask. If you start measuring your worth by how stupid others are, you have already handed your soul to comparison. Do not need others to be worse so that you can feel better. That path is rotten. Your task is not to be less foolish than the foolish. Your task is to be reasonable, just, restrained, and steadfast. The standard is inward excellence, not relative comfort. When you fail, Do not make yourself weaker by self-pity. Self-pity is another form of surrender. It says, "The world has made it impossible for me to act well." That is false. The world may make it difficult. It may tempt. It may delay. It may provoke. It may wound. But it cannot abolish your capacity to choose the next right action. The moment you begin saying, "This is why I behaved badly," you begin excusing the very habit you must uproot. Take responsibility without drama. Say, "I allowed this, I fed this, I can stop feeding it." That is enough. No performance is needed, no thunderous vow is needed. Just a clean return to duty. The present moment is the only place where a judgment can be corrected. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, now. A difficult person may still be in front of you, but your mind does not have to remain captive to the last insult. You can meet the person who is standing there, not the phantom you have constructed from memory and fear. Meet the actual person, hear the actual words, see the actual behavior. Respond to what is real, not to the story your wounded pride wants to tell. This is one of the deepest forms of freedom. It strips away the wasted energy spent fighting imagined enemies. It places you back in reality, where reason can work. And if you must speak, speak only what serves the good. Do not pour out every thought. Not every thought is fit for speech. Some are half-formed, contaminated by resentment, and eager to become damage. Delay them, test them, ask whether they are useful, necessary, and just. If not, let them die before they reach your tongue. A disciplined silence is often more honorable than a careless sentence, but there is also a disciplined sentence, and it should be used when truth requires it. The point is not muteness, the point is mastery. The point is to refuse the rule of impulse. As you practice this, you will begin to feel a strange relief. Not the relief of winning arguments, not the relief of having everyone understand you, the relief of no longer being owned by their behavior. There is a great difference between being affected and being controlled. You may still feel the sting, the body may still tense, the first thought may still flare, but these do not have to become your master. The mature soul can experience disturbance without becoming destructive. It can notice the rising of anger and remain answerable to reason. That is progress. That is real progress. Not the fantasy of never being provoked, but the discipline of not being governed by provocation. Let this become your daily oath. When difficult people appear, I will not rush to judgment. I will not hand my reason over to the first feeling. I will observe. I will distinguish. I will choose. I will remember that my character is mine to guard. I will remember that another person's disorder is not my permission to become disordered. I will remember that the only true loss is the loss of virtue. Everything else is inconvenience, noise, or opinion. This is how a free person speaks to himself. This is how a free person survives a harsh world without becoming harsh in return. You must also stop expecting gratitude from people whose behavior already shows their limits. Some will not appreciate your restraint. Some will mistake calmness for weakness. Some will think silence means defeat. Let them think what they wish. Their opinion is not the measure of your success. What matters is whether you kept faith with reason. What matters is whether you remained just when insulted. What matters is whether you left the encounter more honest than you entered it. The crowd is a poor teacher. Inner integrity is the better judge. When the day ends, sit with yourself and ask the hard questions. Did I protect my peace or did I sell it cheaply? Did I respond from judgment or from wounded vanity? Did I act with justice or with spite? Did I speak to heal or to strike? Did I remain free inside the pressure or did I beg the world to become easier? These questions do not exist to condemn you. They exist to wake you. A life is not changed by vague intention. It is changed by exact examination and repeated correction. Do not let the sun set on a mind that has not looked at itself. There is no dignity in being mastered by people who themselves are not masters of anything. That is what you must tell yourself when irritation rises. The person who is rude may be weak. The person who provokes may be insecure. The person who mocks may be desperate to conceal their own disorder. Do not build a shrine to their conduct inside your mind. Observe it, judge it correctly, and move on. You are not required to absorb their chaos. You are required to preserve your own soul from becoming chaotic in response. If you keep doing this, something remarkable happens. The same people who once controlled your mood begin to lose their power over you. Not because they changed, but because you changed your judgment. The same words that once burned now pass through you with less force. The same disrespect that once provoked revenge now meets a firmer and quieter mind. You do not become numb, you become steady. You do not become indifferent to virtue. You become more attached to it than to your pride. That is the victory. A person who cannot be easily offended is not a person who has been softened by the world. He is a person who has sharpened himself against it. So stop rehearsing the old excuse that you are simply too sensitive or too reactive or too tired. These may describe your current habits, but they do not define your power. Habits can be altered, patterns can be examined, the mind can be trained. But it must be trained today, not someday. Every encounter with a difficult person is an opportunity to practice the art of inner rule. Every insult is a chance to test whether you are still a prisoner of appearances. Every provocation is a summons to self-command. Do not waste these chances. They are the raw material of freedom. Begin now, not after the next insult, not after the next fight. Now, while the mind is still capable of listening, decide that your judgments will no longer be casual. Decide that you will pause before you speak. Decide that you will not let another person's disorder become your own. Decide that you will review yourself each night with honesty and rise each morning with readiness. Decide that you will not trade your virtue for momentary relief. Decide that your life will be governed by reason, not by reflex. There is no nobler use of a human life than this. And remember this above all, the world will continue to produce difficult people. That is not the problem. The problem is whether you will continue to meet them with an untrained mind. You are not called to make the world perfect. You are called to make your own character excellent. That is enough. That is always enough. If you remain just, restrained, courageous, and wise, then no insult can touch the core of you. No rude person can steal your peace unless you first hand it over. No difficult encounter can defeat you unless you surrender your judgment. So do not surrender. Stand watch over your mind. Guard your impressions. Master your judgments. And when the next difficult person appears, meet them not as a victim of their behavior, but as a ruler of yourself. That is the beginning of freedom. That is the work, and it is work worth doing before this day is gone. Number 2. Accept what others choose without surrendering your inner peace. You spend too much of your life trying to negotiate with choices that never belonged to you. You wait for another person to become more thoughtful before allowing yourself to become calm. You wait for someone to admit they were wrong before allowing your mind to become quiet. You wait for fairness before practicing justice. You wait for kindness before choosing patience. In doing this, you quietly hand over the government of your own life to people who have never accepted responsibility for it. This is the beginning of unnecessary suffering, not because the world contains difficult people, but because you have allowed their decisions to become the measure of your peace. Look honestly at the pattern. Someone disappoints you, and your thoughts immediately move toward changing them. You imagine better words they should have spoken. You replay conversations that cannot be repeated. You construct arguments that will finally make them understand. Meanwhile, the present moment disappears. Your attention no longer belongs to reason. It belongs to an imagined future where another person becomes exactly who you want them to be. That future is uncertain, yet you continue investing your peace into it as though certainty could be created through worry. The disciplined mind begins somewhere entirely different. It begins by asking one simple question: what truly belongs to me in this moment? Not what I wish belonged to me, not what would make life easier, only what actually rests within my own power. Another person's choices are not among those things. Their habits are not yours. Their character is not yours. Their opinions are not yours. Their anger does not belong to your mind unless you decide to welcome it inside. This truth may feel difficult because the mind has grown accustomed to believing that control over others would finally produce peace. Yet experience has already proven otherwise. Think carefully about every person you have tried to change through frustration. Did your frustration make them wiser? Did your disappointment reshape their character? Did your anger create understanding? Most often it only exhausted you while leaving the other person almost exactly as they were. The lesson is plain. Energy spent governing another person's choices is energy withdrawn from governing your own. The disciplined life asks something much harder and much more valuable. It asks whether you can remain faithful to reason even while another person remains faithful to foolishness. Anyone can appear calm when surrounded by agreeable people. The true examination begins when another person refuses to meet your expectations. That is where character becomes visible, not during comfort, but during resistance. Many people believe inner peace is a reward given by favorable circumstances. They believe peaceful days arrive only after problems disappear. This belief quietly turns peace into something fragile because circumstances are never fully obedient. There will always be interruptions. There will always be misunderstandings. There will always be people whose actions conflict with your hopes. If peace depends upon removing all of these, then peace will remain permanently delayed. Instead, understand peace as something created by disciplined judgment. It is not found outside the mind. It is practiced within it. Every moment offers another opportunity to choose whether your thoughts will serve reality or resist it. Reality announces what has already happened. Resistance argues with facts that cannot be rewritten. One produces clarity. The other produces endless agitation. There is a habit that deserves careful examination. Whenever another person behaves poorly, notice how quickly your mind begins composing accusations. You tell yourself they should know better, they should respect you, they should recognize your effort, they should appreciate your sacrifice. Every sentence begins with what they should do. Very few begin with what you should do. This is where attention quietly leaves its proper place. Bring attention back to yourself without becoming harsh toward yourself. Simply ask what kind of person you intend to become, regardless of what another person decides today. This question immediately restores responsibility. It reminds you that your character remains unfinished work, requiring your daily effort. The behavior of others may present the examination, but your response determines whether you pass it. Do not confuse acceptance with approval. Accepting another person's choice does not mean declaring that choice good. It simply means refusing to waste strength, denying that the choice has already been made. A dishonest person may continue choosing dishonesty. A careless person may continue neglecting responsibilities. A selfish person may continue seeking only personal advantage. You need not approve of any of these actions, yet refusing to accept their existence only creates another layer of unnecessary conflict inside your own mind. The disciplined soul sees clearly before acting wisely. It does not cover reality with pleasant illusions, nor does it exaggerate reality into permanent disaster. It simply says, "This is what stands before me now. From here, I will choose the most reasonable action available. Such clarity removes emotional confusion because it replaces fantasy with honest observation. Practice this each morning before the demands of the day arrive. Sit quietly for a few moments and remind yourself that every person you meet carries habits formed long before today's conversation. Some will be thoughtful, others will be impatient. Some will speak carefully, others will speak carelessly. None of these possibilities should surprise you. Expecting perfect conduct from imperfect people creates disappointment before the day has even begun. Instead of asking the day to become easier, prepare yourself to become steadier. Tell yourself that your purpose today is not to manage every personality you encounter. Your purpose is to preserve justice in your own actions, moderation in your desires, courage in difficulty, and wisdom in every judgment. These qualities remain available regardless of another person's decisions. As the day unfolds, pause whenever disappointment appears. Do not immediately examine the other person. Examine your expectation. Ask yourself what hidden demand has just been exposed. Were you demanding gratitude that was never promised? Were you demanding agreement that was never guaranteed? Were you demanding certainty where only uncertainty exists? Often the greatest disturbance comes not from events themselves, but from unnoticed expectations collapsing beneath them. This examination requires honesty because the mind prefers blaming outward conditions. It feels easier to identify another person's failures than to acknowledge one's own attachment. Yet every attachment to what lies outside your governance creates another opening through which anxiety enters. The disciplined mind slowly closes these openings by withdrawing unnecessary demands from the world. There will be moments when another person's decisions genuinely create hardship. A promise may be broken, a friendship may end, a colleague may betray trust. None of these experiences should be dismissed as insignificant. They carry real consequences. Yet consequences and suffering are not identical. Consequences belong to events. Suffering often grows from the judgments added afterward. The first may be unavoidable. The second deserves careful examination. When disappointment arrives, refuse the temptation to construct an identity around it. You are not merely someone who has been rejected. You are not merely someone misunderstood. You are not merely someone treated unfairly. Those descriptions capture only events. They do not define character. Character is revealed by what you choose after the event has already occurred. Remember that another person's conduct always belongs first to them. Their dishonesty reveals something about their discipline. Their impatience reveals something about their habits. Their arrogance reveals something about their judgments. Your greatest mistake would be allowing their conduct to determine your own. Once you imitate the very faults you condemn, you have surrendered the higher ground without realizing it. There is remarkable freedom in expecting nothing from another person's moral development while expecting everything from your own. This attitude does not produce indifference, it produces responsibility. Instead of constantly measuring whether others improve, you begin measuring whether your own judgment grows clearer, your speech grows calmer, and your actions grow more consistent with reason. Train yourself to separate influence from control. You may influence another person through honesty, fairness, patience, and example. You cannot command their conclusions. You cannot compel wisdom. Even the clearest truth may be rejected by someone unwilling to examine themselves. Accept this without bitterness. Your duty is faithful effort, not guaranteed success. When speaking with someone whose choices repeatedly create conflict, let your words remain measured rather than emotional. Speak only what reason supports. Remove exaggeration, remove accusation, remove unnecessary hostility. State what is true as clearly as possible. Then allow the other person complete freedom to respond as they choose. Their response belongs to them. Your integrity belongs to you. This practice becomes especially important within families because familiarity often awakens strong expectations. You believe those closest to you should naturally understand your intentions. When they fail to do so, disappointment quickly becomes resentment. Yet closeness does not remove human imperfection. Those you love remain imperfect minds, struggling with their own judgments, just as you struggle with yours. Treat each disagreement as another opportunity to strengthen your own discipline rather than another opportunity to prove yourself correct. Being correct without self-command accomplishes very little. Remaining reasonable while disagreement continues accomplishes much more because it protects the condition of your own character. Each evening, spend time reviewing the choices you made throughout the day. Do not begin by evaluating everyone else's conduct. Begin with your own mind. Ask where another person's decision unsettled your peace. Ask which expectation remained hidden until circumstances exposed it. Ask whether your response reflected wisdom or merely habit. This daily examination gradually uncovers patterns that remain invisible during emotional moments. You may discover that the same attachments return repeatedly. Perhaps you crave approval more than you admitted. Perhaps criticism unsettles you because your confidence rests too heavily upon reputation. Perhaps rejection feels unbearable because you quietly believed acceptance could determine your worth. These discoveries should not discourage you. They reveal exactly where discipline must continue. Peace becomes stronger each time you choose reason over attachment. It becomes steadier each time you stop demanding certainty from uncertain people. It becomes quieter each time you release another expectation that reality never promised to fulfill. Notice how much lighter your mind becomes when it no longer carries responsibility for every decision surrounding it. You begin listening instead of preparing arguments. You begin observing instead of assuming motives. You begin acting according to principle instead of emotional momentum. This transformation does not happen suddenly. It grows through many ordinary moments in which you quietly choose self-governance over frustration. Eventually, you recognize that freedom has never depended upon arranging perfect circumstances. Freedom has always depended upon governing your own judgments with consistency. The world remains unpredictable. Human beings remain imperfect. Opinions continue changing. Plans continue failing. Yet your commitment to reason can remain constant through all of it. Whenever another person's choice threatens your tranquility, return immediately to the central discipline. Ask yourself, what remains truly yours? Your honesty remains yours. Your fairness remains yours. Your patience remains yours. Your willingness to act with dignity remains yours. These are possessions no one can remove without your consent. If another person chooses anger, let them carry anger. If another person chooses deception, let them carry deception. If another person chooses resentment, let them carry resentment. Do not volunteer to carry burdens that belong to another soul. Your task is already demanding enough. It is the lifelong work of governing your own mind. Never postpone peace until other people become wiser. Never postpone integrity until circumstances become favorable. Never postpone disciplined living until relationships become effortless. Begin now with the person whose choices you truly command. That person is yourself. The day will continue presenting people whose actions conflict with your hopes. Meet each encounter with steady judgment instead of hidden demands. Accept reality exactly as it stands before deciding how virtue requires you to respond. In doing so, you will discover a peace that no longer depends upon another person's approval, agreement, gratitude, or transformation. You will discover the quiet strength of a mind that refuses to surrender itself to choices it was never meant to control. That strength is not borrowed from the world. It is built within, one disciplined judgment at a time, and once established, it becomes a refuge that no difficult person can take away. Number 3. Guard your reason against every careless insult and provocation. An insult has no hands. It cannot seize your judgment, bend your character, or force your reason into submission. It arrives only as sound, expression, or opinion. What transforms it into suffering is the welcome you give it inside your own mind. This is where the real struggle begins, not in the mouth of the person who speaks carelessly, but in the silent place where you decide what those words will mean. If you neglect that place, every careless remark becomes a command over your emotions. If you guard it with discipline, even harsh words lose their authority before they ever reach your character. Most people believe they are reacting to another person's behavior. Look more closely. They are reacting to the judgment they formed about that behavior within a single unexamined moment. A sentence is spoken. Before reason has time to observe it, the mind has already concluded that dignity has been stolen, respect has been denied, or reputation has been damaged. The disturbance begins long before any deliberate thought appears. Habit takes control, and habit speaks faster than wisdom. This is why an undisciplined mind lives under constant attack. It mistakes every impression for a final verdict. Your first responsibility is not to silence the careless speaker. Your first responsibility is to prevent carelessness from entering your own thinking. Another person's words belong to their character. Your interpretation belongs to yours. Confusing these two realms has become one of the most common causes of unnecessary suffering. You spend hours examining what another person intended while neglecting the quality of your own response, yet only one of those remains available to your guidance. Observe what happens when criticism reaches you. Before your mouth opens, another conversation has already begun inside your thoughts. One part of the mind rushes toward defense. Another begins searching for retaliation. Another quietly remembers old grievances, collecting fresh evidence to strengthen long-held resentment. None of this serves reason. None of it improves judgment. It merely strengthens the habit of emotional dependence. The disciplined life begins by interrupting this invisible conversation before it grows powerful. The moment harsh words arrive, refuse immediate agreement with your first interpretation. Say to yourself that you have received sounds requiring examination rather than conclusions requiring obedience. This simple distinction protects the mind from becoming the servant of impulse. You are no longer dragged by appearances because you have remembered that appearances demand investigation before acceptance. Consider how often insults depend entirely upon borrowed authority. Someone declares you incapable, and suddenly you begin measuring yourself through their opinion. Someone questions your value, and your confidence immediately begins collapsing. Someone mocks your effort, and your purpose starts trembling. Why should another person's judgment carry greater weight than your own honest examination? If your conscience knows you have acted according to reason, careless opinions cannot remove what disciplined conduct has already established. This does not mean rejecting every criticism automatically. Such behavior would merely replace emotional weakness with intellectual pride. Some criticism deserves thoughtful attention because it exposes genuine faults requiring correction. The disciplined mind neither accepts nor rejects immediately. It investigates carefully. Ask whether the criticism points toward truth or merely reflects another person's passing emotion. If it reveals a weakness within your character, receive it without resentment and improve yourself. If it rests upon ignorance or unfairness, allow it to remain with the person who created it. In both cases, reason remains untouched because it refuses unnecessary extremes. The greatest danger of provocation is not that another person behaves badly. The greater danger is that you begin resembling the very conduct you claim to oppose. A careless remark tempts you toward careless speech. An unfair accusation tempts you toward unfair judgment. A hostile attitude tempts you toward hostility. In defending yourself against disorder, you quietly become disordered. This is a costly exchange because you sacrifice your own discipline without changing the other person at all. Remember that character is revealed most clearly when circumstances invite its abandonment. Courtesy shown toward pleasant people proves very little. Calmness preserved during peaceful conversations requires little effort. Real discipline becomes visible when irritation appears and still fails to overthrow reason. The mind trained in virtue does not wait for favorable conditions before practicing self-command. It treats every difficult encounter as another opportunity to strengthen the habit of wise judgment. Begin preparing long before conflict arrives. Every morning remind yourself that your greatest possession is not reputation, approval, influence, or comfort. Your greatest possession is the ability to choose honorable action regardless of surrounding conditions. Hold this thought before beginning your day. Let it become the foundation beneath every conversation. When criticism eventually appears, it will find a mind already anchored instead of one searching desperately for stability. There is another habit that deserves careful correction. Many people rehearse insults long after the conversation has ended. The event lasts only moments, yet the imagination extends it across entire days. You repeat every sentence. You invent better replies. You construct victories that never happened. Meanwhile, the person who offended you has already continued living, while you remain imprisoned by a conversation existing only inside memory. This is voluntary captivity disguised as reflection. Reason asks something entirely different. Once the encounter has ended, ask only what remains useful. Did you preserve justice in your speech? Did you maintain honesty under pressure? Did you allow vanity to direct your actions? Did you overlook an opportunity for greater patience? Extract instruction from the experience and leave the rest behind. Memory should become a teacher rather than a prison. Never confuse wounded pride with injured character. Pride seeks admiration. Character seeks excellence. Pride fears embarrassment. Character fears abandoning virtue. Pride demands recognition. Character demands consistency. When someone insults you, determine carefully which part of yourself feels threatened. If only pride has been disturbed, no lasting harm has occurred. If your own conduct has departed from wisdom, then correction should begin immediately. This distinction prevents countless unnecessary battles because it directs attention toward what genuinely matters. Notice how easily the mind exaggerates single moments. One disrespectful conversation suddenly becomes evidence that everyone is against you. One careless comment becomes proof that your efforts have no value. One unpleasant exchange becomes the measure of an entire relationship. Such conclusions arise from impatience rather than careful observation. Reality deserves better treatment than hasty generalization. Discipline requires examining events individually without allowing imagination to multiply them into permanent burdens. When provocation appears, reduce your field of attention. Do not attempt to solve your entire life within one emotional moment. Concern yourself only with the next honorable action. Perhaps it is remaining silent until clarity returns. Perhaps it is speaking calmly without accusation. Perhaps it is ending the conversation respectfully. Whatever reason requires, let that single action receive your complete attention. The future can wait. Your duty exists only within the present decision. Some insults strike deeply because they awaken insecurity already living inside you. The words themselves possess little strength until they encounter hidden uncertainty. Therefore, every painful reaction becomes an invitation toward deeper examination. Instead of asking why another person spoke carelessly, ask why those particular words found such fertile ground within your thinking. What belief about yourself remains unsettled? Which fear still governs your judgment? Which attachment continues demanding protection? These questions lead toward genuine freedom because they expose inner weaknesses requiring patient discipline rather than outward revenge. Do not expect complete mastery after one successful encounter. The training of judgment resembles every other form of discipline. It develops through repeated practice under ordinary conditions. Every conversation offers another opportunity to observe your thoughts before following them. Every disagreement strengthens awareness if approached honestly. Progress appears gradually as shorter periods separate provocation from reasoned response. Eventually, the mind begins recognizing emotional movements before they mature into actions. Guard your speech as carefully as you guard your thinking. An uncontrolled tongue often reveals an uncontrolled mind. Before answering harshness, ask whether your words will improve the situation or merely satisfy immediate emotion. Temporary satisfaction frequently produces lasting regret. Measured speech rarely requires apology because it grows from deliberate examination rather than emotional urgency. There will be moments when remaining silent demands greater courage than speaking. Silence chosen from fear weakens character. Silence chosen from wisdom protects it. Learn the difference carefully. If speaking would merely extend conflict without serving truth or justice, restraint becomes an expression of strength rather than avoidance. Your purpose is never to win every exchange. Your purpose is to preserve integrity within every exchange. Likewise, there will be occasions when reason requires firm correction. Calmness should never become an excuse for abandoning justice. You may address wrongdoing directly while remaining free from bitterness. Firmness guided by reason differs greatly from aggression guided by wounded emotion. One protects what is right. The other merely seeks release from inner discomfort. Practice examining your reactions each evening before rest. Recall moments when another person's words disturbed your mind. Do not relive the offense. Instead, examine your judgments. Which assumption intensified the experience? Which expectation remained unrealistic? Which desire for approval became visible? Through this honest review, the mind slowly becomes familiar with its own habits. Familiar habits become easier to correct because they no longer operate unnoticed. You will gradually discover that external provocation loses much of its force when internal discipline grows stronger. The careless speaker continues speaking carelessly, yet your mind no longer rushes towards unnecessary conflict. Insults continue existing, but they fail to occupy your attention for long. The difference does not lie in improved circumstances, it lies in improved judgment. Remember that reason requires protection because it directs every part of life. Once reason becomes clouded, decisions lose clarity, relationships lose fairness, and actions lose consistency. Guarding your reason, therefore, becomes an act of preserving your entire character. Every unnecessary emotional surrender weakens the foundation upon which all other virtues depend. Do not measure your progress by counting how many arguments you have won. Measure it by counting how many opportunities for needless conflict you have quietly refused. Measure it by how quickly your thoughts return to balance after criticism. Measure it by your growing ability to distinguish appearance from reality. These signs reveal genuine inner development because they reflect increasing command over yourself rather than increasing influence over others. Another person's carelessness should never become permission for abandoning your own discipline. Their lack of restraint cannot justify your lack of restraint. Their impatience cannot excuse yours. Their harshness cannot authorize your bitterness. Every person remains responsible for the condition of their own character, regardless of surrounding conduct. This responsibility cannot be transferred, shared, or avoided. There is remarkable freedom in no longer requiring every conversation to preserve your self-worth. Once your confidence rests upon disciplined living rather than public opinion, insults begin losing their power naturally. They become observations requiring examination instead of attacks demanding immediate defense. Some deserve correction, others deserve complete disregard. Reason distinguishes between them without emotional confusion. As this practice deepens, your relationships begin changing in unexpected ways. You listen more carefully because defensiveness no longer interrupts attention. You respond more thoughtfully because haste no longer governs speech. You become more difficult to provoke because your judgment no longer rushes toward conclusions. Others may notice this change, or they may not. Their recognition is irrelevant. The true reward lies within the quiet stability of a mind that has learned where its real authority resides. Carry this discipline into every part of your day. Whether criticism arrives from strangers, colleagues, friends, or family, remember that no careless remark possesses the power to overthrow a well-governed mind unless that mind abandons its own watchfulness. Keep watch over your judgments with steady attention. Examine every impression before accepting it. Let reason become the gatekeeper through which every insult must pass. Most will lose their strength before reaching your character. Those containing truth will become opportunities for improvement. Those lacking truth will pass away without disturbing your peace. Guard your reason as you would guard the most valuable possession entrusted to your care, because everything honorable in your life depends upon it. Wealth may disappear, reputation may change, circumstances may become difficult without warning. Yet as long as your judgment remains disciplined, your character remains secure. No careless insult can take that from you. No passing provocation can diminish it. Only your own neglect can surrender what reason was always capable of protecting. Number 4. Examine every angry impulse before allowing any outward reaction. Anger rarely announces itself as a danger. It arrives wearing the appearance of justice. It tells you that immediate action is necessary. It convinces you that delay is weakness and restraint is surrender. It promises that speaking now will restore your dignity and that striking back with words will correct the wrong that has been done. If you obey this first movement without examination, you become a servant to an impulse that has not yet earned your trust. The greatest mistake is not that anger appears. The greatest mistake is believing that its first command deserves immediate obedience. The disciplined mind understands that the first movement of emotion is not yet a decision. It is an invitation. You are free either to accept it or refuse it. Between the first surge of anger and your outward response lies the only place where freedom truly exists. If that space disappears, habit takes command. If that space is protected, reason remains the ruler of your actions. Your entire character is shaped within this brief interval that most people never notice because they have spent years reacting before thinking. Look honestly at your own experience. How many words have you spoken simply because they arrived first in your mind? How many relationships have been strained because you treated a passing emotional impulse as permanent truth? How many peaceful days have been lost because one uncontrolled moment continued unfolding long after it should have ended? Most regret does not begin with careful judgment. It begins with neglected examination. The first discipline is to stop treating every feeling as an instruction. Feelings reveal movement within the mind, but they do not determine what wisdom requires. Anger can announce that something deserves attention. It cannot determine how that attention should be expressed. The mind that confuses emotion with guidance slowly loses the ability to distinguish between necessity and impulse. Once that distinction disappears, every emotional wave begins directing behavior. Notice how quickly anger narrows your perception. One unpleasant action suddenly becomes the whole person. One careless sentence becomes the entire relationship. One disagreement becomes evidence of permanent hostility. Emotion reduces complexity into simple accusations because it seeks certainty more than truth. Reason moves differently. It widens its view before reaching conclusions. It asks what has actually happened rather than what immediate feeling suggests has happened. The person who never examines anger becomes predictable. Others learn exactly which words provoke them, which criticisms disturb them, and which situations steal their composure. Such a person believes they are defending themselves while actually surrendering control of themselves. Their reactions become available to anyone willing to manipulate them. The disciplined soul refuses this condition because inner freedom cannot exist where every emotional trigger controls outward behavior. Begin each morning by reminding yourself that emotional impulses will certainly arise before the day is finished. Do not promise yourself that you will never feel anger. Such promises ignore human nature rather than preparing for it. Instead, prepare yourself to observe anger carefully without granting it immediate authority. Tell yourself that every strong emotion will first be examined before receiving permission to become action. This quiet commitment creates readiness before pressure arrives. When irritation first appears, direct your attention inward before directing it outward. Instead of asking what another person deserves, ask what your own mind is becoming. Observe the speed of your thoughts. Notice how quickly they begin collecting evidence, repeating old grievances, and predicting future conflict. Anger enjoys building large structures from very small foundations. It searches memory for forgotten injuries and gathers them into one overwhelming burden. Interrupt this process before imagination becomes stronger than reality. Say quietly within yourself that you are experiencing the beginning of anger rather than declaring yourself consumed by it. This small change in language protects the distinction between awareness and identity. You are observing an emotional movement, not surrendering your entire character to it. Once observation becomes possible, examination naturally follows. Ask yourself what judgment has produced this emotional force. Every lasting emotion rests upon some belief accepted without sufficient investigation. Perhaps you concluded that another person intentionally wished to insult you. Perhaps you assumed disrespect where none was intended. Perhaps you believed your expectations carried greater authority than reality itself. The task is not to suppress feeling, but to uncover the judgment sustaining it. Correct the judgment and the emotion gradually loses its command. Many people spend years trying to control anger directly while leaving the thoughts beneath it completely untouched. This approach rarely succeeds because emotions continue returning whenever the same unquestioned beliefs remain active. Lasting discipline begins deeper. It asks whether your conclusions deserve confidence before allowing your emotions to build upon them. Consider how often anger grows stronger through imagination rather than evidence. A conversation ends, yet your thoughts continue speaking long after the other person has gone. You invent future confrontations. You rehearse perfect replies. You imagine motives never confirmed. Each imagined scene strengthens emotion without adding understanding. Eventually you become exhausted by events that never actually occurred. The disciplined mind refuses to cooperate with this unnecessary labor. Instead, remain close to observable facts. Separate what has happened from everything your imagination has attached to it. This practice demands patience because the mind naturally prefers dramatic explanations. Yet peace belongs to those willing to remain faithful to reality even when fantasy appears more emotionally satisfying. Remember that no emotional impulse deserves permanent trust merely because it feels powerful. Strength of feeling does not establish truth. A mistaken judgment, passionately believed, remains mistaken. Therefore, never measure certainty by intensity. Measure certainty through careful examination, honest observation, and agreement with reason. There will be moments when anger reveals genuine injustice. Even then, examination remains necessary. Justice pursued without self-command easily becomes another form of disorder. Correcting wrongdoing requires clarity rather than emotional turbulence. A physician does not improve treatment by becoming distressed at every illness. Likewise, your ability to respond wisely improves as emotional confusion decreases rather than increases. Practice delaying outward expression whenever strong emotion appears. Delay is not avoidance. Delay creates space for judgment to recover its proper authority. During this brief pause, your breathing steadies, your thoughts become less crowded, and your understanding broadens beyond the narrow demands of immediate reaction. Often the response chosen after reflection bears little resemblance to the words first demanded by anger. Understand that silence during examination differs greatly from silent resentment. One protects the mind, while reason gathers strength. The other merely hides emotional conflict beneath outward stillness. Genuine discipline seeks inward clarity rather than outward appearance. If resentment continues growing within, further examination remains necessary until judgment itself becomes orderly. Ask yourself whether the response you are considering will improve your character, regardless of whether it changes another person. This question immediately shifts attention toward what truly belongs to your responsibility. Another person's conduct remains uncertain. Your own conduct remains available at every moment. Build your decisions upon what remains within your care, rather than upon hopes concerning someone else's behavior. One of the greatest hidden causes of anger is the demand that life unfold according to personal preference. Whenever reality refuses this demand, frustration begins searching for someone to blame. Yet reality has never promised complete agreement with your wishes. People misunderstand, disappoint, interrupt, forget, refuse, and fail. None of these possibilities should surprise a disciplined mind. Expecting perfect consistency from imperfect human beings guarantees repeated disturbance. Train yourself to recognize the difference between inconvenience and genuine harm. Many situations that awaken anger merely interfere with comfort rather than virtue. A delayed reply may inconvenience you. An opposing opinion may challenge your pride. A careless remark may unsettle your expectations. None of these necessarily damage your character unless you allow resentment to reshape your conduct. Learn to preserve proportion. Not every discomfort deserves emotional investment. There is quiet strength in becoming difficult to provoke, because your standards for disturbance have become higher. The undisciplined mind reacts whenever preference is denied. The disciplined mind reserves its full attention for matters concerning justice, integrity, and reason. Everything else receives measured consideration rather than emotional surrender. Each evening, return to the events of your day with complete honesty. Search not for reasons to excuse your reactions, but for opportunities to understand them. Recall moments when anger first appeared. At what exact point could examination have begun sooner? Which thought escaped inspection? Which assumption quietly directed your behavior? These reflections gradually sharpen awareness until future emotional movements become easier to recognize before they gain momentum. Never fear discovering weakness within yourself. Hidden weakness governs quietly. Acknowledged weakness becomes available for correction. Every evening examination removes another layer of self-deception and strengthens your ability to recognize emotional habits while they remain small enough to change. Guard especially against the temptation to justify every angry response simply because another person behaved poorly. Their failure cannot become permission for abandoning your own discipline. Another person's lack of self-command creates no exemption from your obligation to remain governed by reason. If both minds surrender to impulse, disorder merely multiplies without producing justice. Likewise, avoid condemning yourself whenever anger appears, despite sincere effort. Emotional movement belongs to human nature. Moral responsibility begins with what follows. If you recognize the impulse, examine its cause, correct mistaken judgment, and choose honorable action, then each difficult moment becomes another opportunity for growth rather than another source of shame. The discipline you seek is not emotional emptiness, it is emotional governance. The goal is not becoming incapable of feeling, but becoming incapable of surrendering reason whenever strong feeling appears. This distinction changes everything. A disciplined person still experiences disappointment, frustration, grief, and irritation. What changes is the relationship between those emotions and deliberate choice. Emotion becomes something observed rather than something obeyed. As this practice deepens, you will notice subtle changes throughout daily life. Conversations become less exhausting because you no longer carry every disagreement into the next hour. Criticism becomes easier to examine because defensiveness no longer rushes ahead of understanding. Decisions become clearer because emotion no longer clouds every judgment with unnecessary urgency. These changes emerge quietly through consistent practice rather than dramatic moments. Others may continue speaking carelessly. Circumstances may remain unpredictable. Delays, misunderstandings, and disappointments will still arrive without invitation. Yet your inner condition gradually becomes less dependent upon these changing events because you have learned where true authority resides. It does not reside within another person's approval or conduct. It resides within your own disciplined capacity to examine every impulse before allowing it to shape your actions. Protect this discipline every day because it guards far more than isolated moments of anger. It protects your judgment, your relationships, your reputation for fairness, and your ability to live according to reason instead of emotional accident. Each impulse honestly examined strengthens the habit of self-governance. Each reaction wisely restrained preserves dignity that cannot be taken by circumstance. When the next surge of anger rises within you, do not fear it and do not worship it. Welcome it as another examination of your character. Stand quietly before it. Observe it without haste. Search for the judgment beneath it. Test that judgment carefully. Then allow reason alone to decide whether speech, silence, correction, or departure best serves virtue. In that deliberate choice, you will discover a freedom unavailable to those who remain servants of every passing emotion. A life governed in this way becomes steady even when surrounded by conflict, because it has learned that the greatest victory is never over another person's behavior. The greatest victory is preserving command over your own mind before any outward action begins. Number 5. Practice patient silence until wisdom directs your next response. Silence is often misunderstood because many people confuse it with weakness. They imagine that the first person to answer is the strongest, that the quickest reply proves confidence, and that every accusation demands an immediate defense. This belief has made countless minds restless. They speak before understanding, they answer before examining, they defend before discovering whether anything worthy of defense has actually been touched. A disciplined life begins by refusing this habit. Silence is not the absence of strength. Silence is the space where strength refuses to become the servant of impulse. Every conversation places your character under quiet examination, not because others are always judging you, but because every exchange reveals whether your own mind remains governed by reason or by urgency. The undisciplined person experiences a thought and immediately searches for words. The disciplined person first examines whether the thought deserves expression at all. This simple difference shapes the entire course of a life. Many conflicts begin not because people lack intelligence, but because they lack the patience to allow wisdom to arrive before speech. Notice how quickly the desire to answer appears. Someone interrupts you. A criticism reaches your ears. An unfair remark enters the conversation. Before the sentence has even ended, another voice has already begun speaking inside your own mind. It demands correction. It demands defense. It demands victory. This inner pressure feels convincing because it mistakes speed for necessity. Yet most words spoken under this pressure serve emotion rather than reason. They satisfy the moment while damaging everything that follows. The first discipline is to become aware of this invisible urgency. Learn to recognize the sensation that insists you must speak immediately. Do not obey it simply because it feels strong. Observe it carefully. Ask yourself why silence suddenly feels uncomfortable. Often you will discover that your discomfort has little to do with truth and much to do with pride. Pride fears appearing weak. Pride fears being misunderstood. Pride fears losing approval. Once these hidden motives become visible, they begin losing their authority over your choices. Patient silence does not exist to avoid responsibility. It exists to protect responsibility from being corrupted by haste. A delayed response allows judgment to mature. It separates passing emotion from lasting principle. During that brief interval, the mind begins recovering its natural clarity. Thoughts become less crowded. Assumptions become easier to question. The desire to win gradually gives way to the desire to understand. Only then does speech become worthy of trust. Many people regret words they cannot retrieve. Very few regret sentences they wisely decided never to speak. This should teach you something important about the value of restraint. Once language leaves your mouth, it enters another person's memory. It cannot be recalled. It cannot be reshaped. It continues producing consequences long after your emotions have settled. Wisdom, therefore, asks not whether you are capable of speaking, but whether speaking now serves justice, truth, and self-command. The mind often believes silence allows another person to gain advantage. This belief grows from attachment to reputation rather than devotion to virtue. You become anxious that others might misunderstand your quietness. You fear they may believe you have surrendered. Yet another person's interpretation remains outside your governance. If maintaining inner discipline requires temporary misunderstanding, then let misunderstanding remain. Better to preserve integrity than to sacrifice it in pursuit of appearances. Each morning, prepare yourself for conversations before they occur. Tell yourself that today many opportunities will arise inviting unnecessary speech. Someone may provoke you. Someone may exaggerate your mistakes. Someone may speak carelessly without considering the effect of their words. Your purpose is not to prevent these encounters. Your purpose is to meet them with a mind already committed to examination before expression. This preparation strengthens awareness long before difficulty appears. Throughout the day, practice listening with greater attention than you speak. Most people hear only enough to prepare their next reply. Their attention remains divided because they have already chosen a conclusion before the conversation has fully unfolded. The disciplined listener seeks understanding before response. Such listening requires humility because it accepts the possibility that first impressions may be incomplete. A mind willing to learn remains calmer than a mind determined only to defend itself. When someone speaks harshly, resist the temptation to fill every silence with explanation. Silence often reveals more than hurried speech. It allows another person's words to stand on their own without immediate resistance. It gives you time to distinguish between facts and assumptions. It also reveals whether the conversation still deserves continuation or whether further discussion would merely increase confusion. There are moments when silence uncovers truths that constant speaking hides. While remaining quiet, you begin noticing movements within your own thinking that usually escape attention. You discover the craving for approval. You recognize the fear of criticism. You observe the desire to appear superior. These discoveries become possible because silence removes the distraction of constant outward expression and directs attention toward the inner life where real discipline must occur. Never mistake inward silence for empty passivity. The quiet mind remains deeply active. It examines motives. It questions assumptions. It separates certainty from speculation. It asks whether the response being prepared reflects reason or merely wounded preference. This hidden labor often accomplishes far more than immediate conversation because it prevents careless judgment from becoming careless action. Practice allowing several breaths to pass before answering difficult questions or emotional remarks, not because breathing alone transforms character, but because intentional delay interrupts automatic habit. During those few moments, ask yourself whether your next words will improve understanding or merely release emotional pressure. If they serve only temporary relief, continue remaining silent until better judgment appears. There is remarkable freedom in discovering that not every statement requires your opinion. The world continually presents conversations, arguments, complaints, and invitations to unnecessary conflict. The undisciplined mind rushes toward each one as though personal value depends upon participation. The disciplined mind asks whether entering the discussion serves any meaningful purpose. Frequently, the wisest contribution is choosing not to increase noise where clarity is already scarce. Observe how often speech attempts to accomplish what only character can achieve. You explain your goodness instead of living it. You defend your honesty instead of practicing it consistently. You demand recognition instead of quietly earning trust through repeated conduct. Words possess value only when supported by disciplined action. Otherwise, they become substitutes for the very qualities they claim to represent. Another valuable practice is learning to distinguish between necessary correction and emotional reaction. Some situations require firm speech because justice demands clarity. Remaining silent in the presence of genuine wrongdoing may become another form of neglect. Yet even necessary correction benefits from patient preparation. Words shaped by reflection carry greater weight than words driven by irritation. Calm firmness reaches places that emotional force rarely enters. During moments of disagreement, ask yourself whether your purpose is understanding or victory. These goals often appear similar while leading toward entirely different behavior. The desire for victory encourages interruption, exaggeration, and defensiveness. The desire for understanding encourages careful listening, measured questions, and thoughtful replies. Only one of these strengthens character, the other merely strengthens attachment to being right. Silence also protects you from another common weakness. Many people speak simply because uncertainty feels uncomfortable. Rather than admitting incomplete knowledge, they rush toward confident conclusions. Yet wisdom grows comfortable with saying that further examination is needed. There is no shame in delaying judgment until sufficient understanding has been gathered. Far greater harm comes from pretending certainty where only assumption exists. As the day unfolds, pay careful attention to conversations that continue inside your own mind after external discussions have ended. Many people remain physically silent while inwardly arguing for hours. They replay every sentence. They compose imaginary victories. They defend themselves before invisible audiences. This inward noise deserves the same discipline as outward speech. Gently interrupt these endless rehearsals by returning attention to present responsibilities. Thoughts that produce neither virtue nor useful action deserve no permanent residence within the mind. Each evening, examine not only what you said, but also why you said it. Did your words arise from commitment to truth or fear of criticism? Did they strengthen justice or merely satisfy pride? Did they encourage understanding or deepen division? Honest answers to these questions gradually reveal habits hidden beneath ordinary conversation. Once seen clearly, these habits become available for patient correction. You may notice that some of your strongest impulses to speak arise from attachment to outcomes beyond your control. You want another person to approve of you. You want immediate agreement. You want every misunderstanding resolved before the conversation ends. Yet these outcomes remain uncertain regardless of how skillfully you speak. Your responsibility extends only to offering words guided by reason. What others conclude afterward belongs to their own judgment rather than yours. Silence becomes especially valuable when dealing with people who seek emotional reactions rather than honest dialogue. Such individuals often measure success by the disturbance they create within others. If you answer every provocation immediately, you unknowingly cooperate with their purpose. Patient silence quietly refuses participation in this exchange. It protects your attention from becoming dependent upon another person's disorder. Do not imagine that disciplined silence means suppressing every thought forever. Eventually, wisdom directs speech because truth sometimes requires expression. The difference lies in the source. Instead of speaking because emotion demands release, you speak because reason has completed its examination. Your words become fewer yet more meaningful. They become steady rather than hurried. They become capable of correcting without humiliating, disagreeing without contempt, and defending what is right without surrendering inner balance. As this discipline matures, your relationships begin changing in subtle ways. Others discover that provoking you no longer guarantees immediate reaction. Conversations become calmer because your attention remains available instead of being consumed by emotional urgency. Even when disagreement continues, mutual respect becomes easier to preserve because your responses arise from deliberate choice rather than passing impulse. Remember that true authority over speech begins long before the first word is spoken. It begins with governing the thoughts seeking expression. If the mind remains chaotic, silence alone cannot create wisdom. The purpose of patient silence is to provide room for examination until judgment becomes orderly enough to guide language honorably. Outward restraint without inward discipline eventually collapses. Lasting self-command grows from transforming the quality of thought itself. Do not become discouraged when this practice feels difficult. Years of habitual reaction cannot be replaced in a single day. The tongue has long obeyed emotions that were never carefully questioned. Patient correction requires consistency rather than perfection. Each conversation becomes another opportunity to delay unnecessary speech, observe hidden motives, and strengthen allegiance to reason. Small victories accumulated faithfully reshape character more reliably than dramatic promises quickly forgotten. The quiet strength you seek does not depend upon becoming admired for your composure. It depends upon knowing that your own conscience remains undisturbed because your words have been governed by wisdom rather than impulse. External praise may come or disappear without warning. Inner integrity grows through repeated choices that no audience fully witnesses. That unseen labor forms the foundation of genuine freedom. Carry this discipline into every encounter. Before your next reply, allow patience to stand where habit once stood. Let examination come before expression. Let understanding come before judgment. Let reason determine whether speech serves virtue or merely satisfies emotion. In doing so, you will discover that silence is not an empty pause between conversations. It is the workshop where character is quietly formed. Every moment spent waiting for wisdom before answering strengthens the one thing no careless conversation should ever be allowed to weaken: your capacity to govern yourself with calm judgment, disciplined thought, and unwavering devotion to what is truly good. Number 6. Strengthen your character through calm choices under constant pressure. Pressure does not arrive to reveal what the world is. It arrives to reveal what you are. During quiet moments, almost anyone can appear patient, thoughtful, and disciplined. When circumstances become demanding, when voices become louder, when expectations begin pressing against your comfort, your hidden habits step forward without invitation. At that moment, your true training becomes visible. The greatest danger is not that pressure exists. The greatest danger is believing that pressure excuses abandoning reason. It never does. It merely exposes whether reason has become the foundation of your character or only an idea you admire when life is easy. Many people spend years searching for calmer circumstances while neglecting to build a calmer mind. They believe peace depends upon removing difficulty. They imagine that once the workplace becomes easier, once relationships become smoother, once uncertainty disappears, they will naturally become wiser. Yet every season of life introduces another form of pressure. If your discipline depends upon favorable conditions, then your discipline has never truly belonged to you. The stable life begins when you stop asking the world to reduce its demands and begin strengthening your ability to meet those demands without surrendering your judgment. Look carefully at the moments that unsettle you most. A deadline approaches. A conversation becomes tense. Someone questions your decisions. A plan suddenly changes. Notice how quickly the mind begins demanding immediate relief. It searches for someone to blame. It searches for certainty where uncertainty naturally exists. It searches for escape before understanding. These habits are not created by pressure. They were already present. Pressure simply removes the distractions that once concealed them. The disciplined person welcomes these moments as opportunities for honest examination rather than reasons for complaint. Every difficult circumstance becomes a mirror reflecting the condition of the inner life. If impatience appears, it reveals unfinished work. If fear begins directing decisions, it reveals attachment requiring correction. If frustration overwhelms reason, it reveals judgments accepted without sufficient examination. The event itself becomes less important than the lesson it offers about the state of your own character. Do not ask whether pressure is fair. Ask whether you are meeting it honorably. Fairness belongs to circumstances beyond your command. Honor belongs entirely within your own conduct. The moment you begin measuring your behavior according to the difficulty of your situation, you quietly give circumstances permission to govern your choices. The disciplined life rejects this bargain completely. Virtue does not become optional because conditions become uncomfortable. Begin every morning by preparing your mind instead of merely preparing your schedule. Before work begins and before conversations fill your attention, remind yourself that today will almost certainly contain interruptions, uncertainty, and demands you did not anticipate. Expecting an effortless day weakens resilience because reality rarely agrees with such expectations. Preparing for challenge steadies the mind because difficulty no longer arrives as an unwelcome surprise. It arrives as something already included within your understanding of life. Then make a simple commitment to yourself. Tell yourself that regardless of what happens today, you will refuse to let urgency replace judgment. This commitment does not promise perfect success. It establishes a direction. Throughout the day you return to this promise whenever pressure attempts to convince you that thoughtful action can be postponed until later. Wisdom cannot be postponed. It must be practiced precisely when comfort disappears. Pressure often persuades people to abandon their highest principles in exchange for immediate relief. They become dishonest because truth feels inconvenient. They become impatient because waiting feels difficult. They become harsh because kindness appears ineffective. Yet every time character is exchanged for temporary comfort, the mind becomes weaker. Relief purchased at the cost of integrity never remains peaceful for long because conscience remembers what convenience prefers to forget. Ask yourself a difficult question whenever pressure increases. Are you trying to solve the situation, or are you trying to escape the feeling created by the situation? These are not the same. Many hurried decisions arise not from careful reasoning, but from impatience with emotional discomfort. The mind wants immediate certainty, it wants immediate resolution, it wants immediate control over events that naturally require patience. Recognizing this tendency protects you from confusing emotional urgency with practical necessity. Learn to reduce every difficult moment to the next right action. Pressure encourages the imagination to race toward every possible consequence at once. Suddenly tomorrow, next month, and next year all seem to demand attention within a single anxious moment. The disciplined mind quietly returns to the present responsibility. Ask only what reason requires now, not later, not eventually, only now. One honest action completed faithfully possesses greater value than endless worry about outcomes still beyond your reach. Throughout the day, examine your judgments as carefully as you examine your circumstances. Pressure often convinces you that the situation itself creates your distress. Look deeper. The greater source frequently lies within the meaning you have attached to the event. A delayed opportunity becomes evidence that you are failing. A disagreement becomes proof that respect has vanished. A setback becomes a prediction of permanent defeat. These conclusions arise quickly because habit speaks before reason has fully awakened. Slow this process. Separate observable facts from the fearful interpretations your mind eagerly supplies. You must also become suspicious of the belief that you perform best under emotional intensity. Many people secretly admire their own agitation because it creates the illusion of importance. They mistake frantic activity for disciplined effort. Yet calm attention accomplishes more than restless urgency because it remains capable of accurate judgment. The mind consumed by pressure overlooks simple solutions while becoming trapped inside imagined catastrophes. The quiet mind sees clearly because it has refused to surrender itself to unnecessary panic. Practice remaining physically composed whenever tension rises. Let your movements become slower rather than hurried. Let your breathing remain steady rather than rushed. Let your voice remain measured rather than strained. These outward choices influence inward judgment because they interrupt the body's habit of amplifying emotional pressure. You are reminding yourself through deliberate action that circumstances do not possess authority over your conduct unless you willingly grant it. Remember that every decision shapes the person you are becoming. Character is not formed during rare moments of extraordinary achievement. It is formed through ordinary choices repeated consistently under ordinary pressure. Every time you choose fairness instead of resentment, patience instead of irritation, honesty instead of convenience, courage instead of avoidance, another part of your character becomes stronger. These victories often remain invisible to others, yet they gradually transform the entire structure of your inner life. Many people believe strength means never feeling overwhelmed. This misunderstanding causes unnecessary shame because every human mind encounters difficulty. True strength appears somewhere else. It appears in refusing to let temporary emotion become permanent direction. You may feel uncertainty without allowing uncertainty to govern your principles. You may experience disappointment without abandoning gratitude. You may encounter fear without surrendering courage. Character grows whenever reason continues leading, despite emotional resistance. There will be days when pressure comes from other people rather than circumstances. Expectations become unreasonable. Tempers become unpredictable. Criticism becomes unfair. During such moments, remind yourself that another person's emotional condition does not become your responsibility to imitate. If someone loses composure, you are not required to lose yours. If another person speaks carelessly, you remain free to choose careful speech. The quality of your conduct must never depend upon the quality of theirs. This freedom requires constant attention because the mind naturally copies the atmosphere surrounding it. Anger invites anger. Anxiety invites anxiety. Complaint invites complaint. Resist this silent imitation. Become the person who introduces steadiness instead of absorbing disorder. Such influence does not begin by changing others. It begins by refusing to let external confusion establish inward confusion. Each afternoon, pause briefly and ask yourself where your attention currently rests. Has it become trapped inside imagined outcomes beyond your influence? Has it wandered toward resentment concerning events already finished? Has it become consumed by another person's opinions? Bring it gently back to what remains yours, your present judgment, your present action, your present opportunity to practice virtue. Every return strengthens the habit of self-governance. Do not wait until the evening to recover your discipline. Recover it the moment you notice it slipping away. The undisciplined mind postpones correction because it hopes tomorrow will require less effort. Tomorrow merely introduces new examinations. Today contains the only opportunity currently available for strengthening character. Use it fully. There is another mistake that deserves attention. Some people become calm only after pressure has passed. They congratulate themselves for eventually finding perspective once circumstances improve. Yet wisdom seeks composure during the examination rather than after its conclusion. Any person can explain the proper response once danger has disappeared. The disciplined soul practices right judgment while uncertainty still surrounds it. This ability develops through repeated reflection. At the close of each day, ask yourself where pressure influenced your choices. Did you become impatient because events unfolded slowly? Did you compromise honesty because truth required courage? Did you seek approval instead of acting according to conscience? These questions are not accusations, they are instruments for refinement. Honest examination gradually transforms future behavior because hidden habits lose their power once brought into clear awareness. Also recognize moments when you remained faithful to reason despite difficulty. Not to praise yourself, but to understand which disciplines supported your steadiness. Perhaps you paused before answering. Perhaps you simplified an overwhelming problem into one manageable responsibility. Perhaps you accepted uncertainty instead of demanding impossible guarantees. Preserve these practices carefully because they become reliable companions during future trials. Never measure your worth by the amount of pressure surrounding you. Some people become proud merely because they endure constant difficulty. Endurance alone does not establish excellence. The important question is how you endure. Hardship accompanied by bitterness weakens the soul. Hardship accompanied by wisdom strengthens it. Pressure becomes valuable only when it encourages greater devotion to justice, moderation, courage, and sound judgment. The desire to escape every demanding circumstance quietly steals opportunities for growth. If every challenge is avoided, every difficult conversation postponed, every responsibility abandoned at the first sign of discomfort, character remains undeveloped. The disciplined life does not seek unnecessary hardship, yet neither does it flee from necessary hardship. It meets each obligation with steady attention because it understands that virtue matures through faithful practice rather than comfortable isolation. Another valuable discipline is refusing to compare your burdens with those carried by others. Comparison distracts the mind from its proper work. Whether another person's path appears easier or harder changes nothing about your present responsibility. Your task remains exactly the same. Govern your own judgments, fulfill your own duties, preserve your own integrity. Comparison consumes energy that reason could use far more wisely. When pressure begins increasing, remember that you are always making two decisions at once. One concerns the external problem before you. The other concerns the kind of person you are becoming while addressing it. Most people notice only the first decision. The disciplined person never forgets the second. Every challenge asks not only for practical action, but also for moral direction. Will this moment strengthen patience or impatience? Will it strengthen honesty or compromise? Will it strengthen courage or avoidance? The answer depends entirely upon your choices. As this understanding deepens, you gradually stop fearing pressure itself. You begin seeing it as another occasion for disciplined living rather than another interruption to happiness. Calmness becomes less dependent upon favorable conditions because it now rests upon practiced judgment. The world may continue presenting uncertainty, opposition, and difficulty, yet your response becomes increasingly stable because it no longer seeks security in changing circumstances. Carry this discipline into tomorrow morning before the first demand arrives. Prepare your thoughts before preparing your tasks. Remind yourself that no amount of external pressure possesses the authority to command your character. Only your own judgments determine whether reason remains on its rightful throne. Guard those judgments carefully, examine them honestly, correct them patiently whenever they wander from truth. Then walk into every challenge with quiet determination rather than anxious resistance. Let each difficult decision become another opportunity to strengthen integrity. Let every demanding conversation become another exercise in measured judgment. Let every unexpected obstacle remind you that character is not preserved by avoiding pressure but by making calm choices while pressure remains. A life governed in this way cannot be made perfect by circumstances, yet it becomes something far greater. It becomes dependable. It becomes disciplined. It becomes free because its deepest strength no longer depends upon what happens around it, but upon the unwavering commitment to choose reason over impulse in every moment entrusted to its care. Number 7. Remember, every difficult person tests your virtue, not worth. The greatest mistake you can make when facing a difficult person is believing they possess the power to measure your worth. The moment you accept this belief, your peace no longer belongs to you. It begins rising and falling according to another person's opinions, moods, habits, and shortcomings. You quietly place your value into hands that cannot even govern themselves. This is not merely an emotional mistake, it is a failure of judgment. A disciplined mind never allows another person's disorder to become the standard by which it evaluates its own character. Look carefully at what truly happens during a difficult encounter. Someone speaks impatiently, someone dismisses your effort, someone questions your intentions, someone behaves with arrogance or disrespect. At first glance, it appears they are judging you. Yet something far more important is taking place. The situation is revealing the condition of your own inner life. It is asking whether justice remains steady when fairness disappears. It is asking whether patience survives irritation. It is asking whether self-command continues when pride feels threatened. The examination is not of your value. The examination is of your virtue. Many people leave these encounters believing they have been diminished. They spend hours wondering whether they deserved better treatment. They replay conversations searching for proof that they remain respectable. They become exhausted defending an inner worth that was never placed in danger. Their suffering grows because they have mistaken another person's behavior for a verdict upon their own character. No careless action can determine your worth unless you quietly accept that judgment as your own. Your worth does not rise when praised, and it does not fall when criticized. It is not strengthened by applause, nor weakened by rejection. The only thing capable of improving your character is your own commitment to reason and virtue. Likewise, the only thing capable of corrupting your character is your willingness to abandon those principles. Once this truth becomes clear, many burdens immediately lose their weight. You stop asking whether others approve of you, and begin asking whether your own conscience approves of your conduct. The difficult person, therefore, becomes something entirely different from what you first imagined. Instead of becoming an obstacle to your peace, they become an opportunity to observe the strength of your discipline. Their impatience allows you to examine your own patience. Their dishonesty allows you to strengthen your commitment to truth. Their anger reveals whether your calmness depends upon comfortable surroundings or genuine self-governance. Without such examinations, many people spend years believing themselves virtuous simply because life has not yet challenged their principles. This understanding changes the purpose of every uncomfortable encounter. Instead of entering conversations hoping everyone behaves perfectly, you begin entering them prepared to preserve your own integrity regardless of how others behave. This shift is profound because it returns attention to the only place where meaningful improvement remains possible. You cannot shape another person's moral character through frustration. You can refine your own through disciplined response. Each morning, prepare yourself by remembering that human beings carry different levels of understanding, self-control, and wisdom. Some have spent years examining themselves. Others have avoided such work entirely. Expecting identical conduct from every person ignores reality. It also creates unnecessary disappointment. Instead, prepare your own mind to remain guided by reason regardless of whom you encounter. Let your first concern each day become the quality of your own character rather than the predictability of someone else's behavior. When someone behaves poorly, pause before interpreting the event personally. Ask yourself whether their conduct truly reveals something about your worth or whether it reveals something about their present state of mind. A person ruled by anger naturally produces angry speech. A person ruled by insecurity often seeks unnecessary conflict. A person lacking discipline frequently spreads confusion wherever they go. Their actions primarily reveal the habits they have cultivated. Do not rush to make yourself the center of another person's disorder. There is another habit requiring careful correction. Many people believe they honor themselves by taking every insult personally. They imagine that constant sensitivity proves self-respect. In truth, the opposite often occurs. A mind that reacts to every careless remark quietly admits dependence upon outside approval. Genuine self-respect remains much steadier. It understands that another person's inability to recognize virtue does not reduce virtue itself. Do not confuse dignity with emotional defensiveness. Dignity requires no constant demonstration. It does not demand immediate recognition from strangers. It does not seek victory in every disagreement. Dignity quietly continues choosing honorable action even while misunderstanding persists. It allows conduct rather than argument to reveal character over time. You must also learn to distinguish between injury to reputation and injury to virtue. Reputation exists within other people's opinions. Virtue exists within your own choices. Reputation changes constantly because human judgment changes constantly. Virtue remains available in every moment because it depends entirely upon your decisions. Which foundation deserves greater trust? The answer becomes obvious once examined honestly, yet many people continue sacrificing virtue in desperate attempts to preserve reputation. They become dishonest to avoid criticism. They become harsh to appear strong. They become resentful to protect pride. In saving appearances, they quietly abandon the very qualities that deserved protection. Practice asking yourself one question whenever another person's conduct unsettles you. Does this situation require improvement in my character or merely reassurance of my ego? These two needs often appear similar while leading toward opposite actions. Ego seeks confirmation that it remains important. Character seeks correction wherever correction is needed. Ego becomes offended easily because it constantly measures status. Character remains occupied with becoming wiser rather than appearing superior. You will notice that difficult people often awaken hidden attachments you did not realize existed. Perhaps you crave appreciation more deeply than you admitted. Perhaps disagreement unsettles you because certainty has become part of your identity. Perhaps disrespect feels unbearable because your confidence depends heavily upon external recognition. Instead of blaming the difficult person for exposing these attachments, become grateful for the opportunity to see them clearly. Hidden weaknesses cannot be strengthened until they become visible. Throughout the day, remember that every encounter offers two possible directions. One path leads toward resentment, the other leads toward refinement. Resentment asks why another person behaved badly. Refinement asks what this moment teaches about the current condition of your own soul. The first path keeps attention fixed upon what lies beyond your influence. The second returns attention to the work that genuinely belongs to you. This does not require approving harmful behavior or remaining passive before injustice. Wisdom still demands honest boundaries. Justice still requires truthful speech when necessary. Courage still refuses cooperation with wrongdoing. Yet all these actions arise from disciplined judgment rather than wounded pride. The difference is essential. One seeks the good, the other seeks emotional satisfaction. Only the first strengthens character. Take time during the middle of your day to examine whether another person's behavior has quietly occupied more of your attention than your own conduct. If you have spent hours evaluating their motives while neglecting your own choices, gently redirect your focus. Ask what remains available to your governance at this very moment. Your honesty remains available. Your fairness remains available. Your patience remains available. Your willingness to continue acting according to reason remains fully available regardless of what anyone else has chosen. Many people imagine that becoming virtuous requires escaping difficult individuals. They search endlessly for perfect surroundings where no one interrupts their peace. Such places rarely exist because human beings remain imperfect wherever they gather. The wiser approach is different. Learn to preserve your principles while living among imperfect people. This practice develops stability that favorable circumstances alone could never produce. There will be moments when another person's actions genuinely disappoint you. Expectations will be broken. Promises may remain unfulfilled. Trust may require rebuilding. During these moments, avoid making another person's failure the foundation of your identity. You remain responsible for how you continue living afterward. Their choices may influence circumstances, yet they cannot determine whether you continue practicing justice, moderation, courage, and wisdom. Those decisions remain entirely your own. Each evening, conduct a careful examination of the day. Do not begin by listing every fault you observed in others. Begin by asking how faithfully you preserved your own principles while facing those faults. Did impatience weaken your fairness? Did criticism disturb your honesty? Did another person's arrogance tempt you toward contempt? These questions lead toward genuine progress because they concern the only life you are capable of transforming directly. If you discover moments where you failed, do not seek excuses. Simply acknowledge them with honesty. Every failure properly examined becomes instruction rather than defeat. Tomorrow offers another opportunity to respond differently because character is shaped through repeated correction rather than impossible perfection. Likewise, recognize moments where you remained faithful under pressure. Perhaps you answered calmly instead of harshly. Perhaps you resisted unnecessary argument. Perhaps you acted justly despite receiving unfair treatment. Remember these moments not to satisfy pride, but to strengthen confidence in disciplined practice. They remind you that reason grows stronger each time it receives faithful obedience. Over time, you will notice a remarkable change. Difficult people will no longer occupy the central place within your thinking. Their actions become secondary because your attention naturally returns to the condition of your own character. You begin leaving conversations less concerned with whether you won and more concerned with whether you remained honorable. This quiet change marks genuine progress because it reflects freedom from dependence upon external approval. You will also discover greater compassion without becoming naive. Once you understand how deeply undisciplined judgments create suffering, you begin recognizing that many difficult people remain imprisoned by habits they have never examined. This recognition does not excuse harmful conduct, yet it prevents hatred from taking root. You see them as human beings struggling beneath their own mistaken judgments, rather than enemies possessing power over your peace. Never allow another person's behavior to persuade you that virtue is ineffective. The world may reward loudness temporarily. It may admire arrogance for a season. It may confuse impatience with strength. None of these appearances alter what remains genuinely good. Justice remains worthy regardless of popularity. Wisdom remains necessary regardless of fashion. Self-command remains valuable regardless of how many neglect it. Build your life upon these lasting foundations rather than passing opinions. Carry one final discipline with you wherever you go. Whenever you encounter someone who tests your patience, quietly remind yourself that this moment examines your virtue, not your worth. Your value does not stand on trial. Your character stands at work. This single reminder changes the entire encounter. Instead of defending an identity that never required defense, you begin strengthening qualities that truly deserve your attention. Walk through the world with this understanding fixed firmly within your judgment. Let every difficult person become another invitation to practice justice without bitterness, patience without weakness, honesty without hostility, and courage without pride. Measure each day not by how kindly others treated you, but by how faithfully you governed yourself. In doing so, you will discover that your greatest victories never depended upon changing another person's behavior. They depended upon refusing to let another person's behavior decide who you would become. That is where lasting freedom begins. That is where genuine strength quietly takes root. That is where a life governed by reason steadily rises above every careless judgment the world places before it. Number 8. Refuse emotional slavery by choosing reason over wounded pride. There is a prison that requires no walls, no locks, and no chains. It is built each time you allow wounded pride to govern your choices instead of reason. From the outside, your life may appear unchanged. You continue working, speaking, and moving through ordinary days. Yet inwardly you have surrendered the authority that belongs to your own judgment. Every careless remark becomes a command. Every slight becomes an order. Every disagreement determines your peace. This is emotional slavery. It is not created by another person's behavior. It is created the moment you accept that your inner condition must follow whatever another person chooses to do. Many people believe they are defending their dignity when they react from wounded pride. In truth, they are defending an image they have built in their own imagination. They feel compelled to answer every criticism because they fear appearing weak. They compete for the final word because silence feels like defeat. They carry resentment because releasing it seems like surrender. Yet each of these actions reveals dependence rather than strength. The person who cannot govern a wounded ego remains governed by it. Freedom begins only when reason resumes its rightful place above every injured feeling. Examine your own experience with complete honesty. Think of the moments that continue returning to your thoughts long after they have ended. Perhaps someone ignored your effort. Perhaps your opinion was dismissed. Perhaps another person received recognition that you believed belonged to you. Notice how quickly the mind transforms these events into personal judgments. It whispers that you have been diminished. It insists that respect has been stolen. It demands immediate restoration. Before accepting these conclusions, ask whether they arise from reason or from pride seeking reassurance. Pride speaks with urgency because it fears examination. It wants immediate action before careful thought has time to expose its weakness. It tells you that delay is dangerous because delay invites reflection. Reflection often reveals that the insult was smaller than first imagined, that another person's opinion carries less importance than you assumed, or that your own expectations quietly shaped the disappointment. Pride resists these discoveries because they require humility. Reason welcomes them because truth always deserves greater loyalty than self-importance. The disciplined life begins when you stop asking whether your pride feels satisfied and begin asking whether your judgment remains sound. These are entirely different questions. Pride seeks comfort, reason seeks truth. Pride demands victory, reason seeks justice. Pride measures status, reason measures character. Every difficult moment asks you to decide which guide will direct your next action. Do not imagine that wounded pride always appears as loud anger. Sometimes it hides beneath silent resentment. Sometimes it disguises itself as cold distance. Sometimes it appears as endless mental arguments that continue long after the conversation has ended. You replay every sentence. You imagine stronger replies. You construct victories that never occurred. All this hidden labor serves the same master. Pride refuses to release what reason has already recognized as unnecessary. Each morning, prepare your mind for this invisible examination. Before entering your daily responsibilities, remind yourself that you will meet people who disagree with you, misunderstand you, overlook your contributions, or speak carelessly. None of these events possess the power to damage your character unless you willingly allow pride to direct your response. Make a quiet commitment that your first loyalty today will belong to reason rather than self-importance. This single decision creates remarkable stability before difficulty even arrives. As the day unfolds, begin noticing how often your emotions are connected not to reality itself, but to the story you immediately tell about reality. A delayed reply becomes evidence that you are unappreciated. A brief criticism becomes proof that you are disrespected. A different opinion becomes a personal attack. These interpretations appear so quickly that they often escape examination. Yet your suffering grows less from the event than from the meaning your mind attaches to it. The disciplined person learns to question these meanings before allowing them to become beliefs. Whenever you feel the desire to defend yourself immediately, pause and ask what exactly requires defense. Is your character truly under attack? Or is your image of yourself seeking protection? Character cannot be destroyed by another person's opinion. It is strengthened or weakened only through your own choices. Once this truth becomes clear, many unnecessary battles disappear. You stop fighting for appearances and begin preserving what actually matters. There is great strength in accepting that you cannot govern another person's judgment. You may explain yourself with complete honesty and still be misunderstood. You may act with fairness and still be criticized. You may remain patient and still be accused of weakness. These possibilities belong to the nature of human relationships. Refusing to accept them keeps the mind trapped in endless frustration. Accepting them returns your attention to the only place where meaningful authority still exists: your own conduct. Practice separating external events from internal judgments throughout the day. When someone speaks harshly, acknowledge the words without immediately adding conclusions about your worth. When another person receives praise instead of you, notice the event without allowing envy to invent stories of injustice. When your efforts go unnoticed, continue acting according to principle rather than demanding recognition as payment for virtue. The disciplined mind serves what is right because it is right, not because applause has been guaranteed. Pride constantly seeks comparison. It measures itself against every success, every compliment, and every achievement belonging to others. It becomes restless because comparison has no natural ending. There will always be someone receiving greater attention, greater influence, or greater admiration. If your peace depends upon surpassing others, peace will remain forever uncertain. Reason rejects this endless competition. It asks only whether today's actions have brought you closer to justice, wisdom, courage, and moderation than yesterday's actions. You must also become willing to admit your own mistakes without allowing pride to resist correction. Emotional slavery often appears when a person would rather defend an error than acknowledge it honestly. The mind fears that admitting fault will reduce personal value. Yet the opposite is true. Refusing correction weakens character because it protects ignorance. Accepting correction strengthens character because it places truth above vanity. Every honest admission becomes another act of freedom. Throughout your conversations, notice whether you are listening to understand or listening to preserve your pride. A wounded ego hears every disagreement as rejection. A disciplined mind hears disagreement as an opportunity to examine its own thinking. This does not mean every criticism is correct. It means every criticism deserves calm examination before acceptance or rejection. Such examination protects you from both unnecessary defensiveness and careless agreement. There will be moments when another person truly behaves unjustly. Even then, wounded pride remains an unreliable guide. Justice pursued through resentment easily becomes another form of injustice. Speak firmly if firmness is required. Establish clear boundaries if boundaries are necessary. Withdraw from harmful situations when wisdom directs it. Yet perform these actions because reason has examined them carefully, not because pride demands emotional satisfaction. The difference determines whether your conduct strengthens or weakens your character. Take a brief pause during the middle of each day and examine your emotional condition. Ask yourself whether any person's words continue occupying your attention without serving any useful purpose. If they do, ask why. Has pride quietly attached your peace to another person's approval? Has your mind mistaken reputation for virtue? Has resentment become more important than wisdom? Honest questions loosen the grip of emotional habits that otherwise continue unnoticed. The greatest victories rarely occur during public moments. They occur silently within the mind, when no one else witnesses the struggle. A careless insult arrives, yet you refuse to surrender your judgment. A misunderstanding appears, yet you continue acting honorably. Recognition goes elsewhere, yet you remain faithful to your responsibilities without bitterness. These quiet decisions shape the person you become far more deeply than dramatic displays of strength. Each evening, return to yourself with complete honesty. Review the conversations that unsettled you. Search for the exact moment when pride first entered your thinking. Perhaps you became eager to prove yourself. Perhaps you secretly desired admiration. Perhaps you expected gratitude that never arrived. Do not condemn yourself for these discoveries. Welcome them. Hidden attachments lose much of their power once they are brought into the light of careful examination. Then ask another question before ending your day. If the same situations occurred again tomorrow, what would reason advise instead of pride? This reflection prepares the mind for future challenges. Character grows through repeated correction, not through wishing the world would become easier. As your discipline deepens, you will notice that fewer events possess the ability to disturb your peace. Not because people have become kinder, but because your dependence upon their opinions has diminished. You begin carrying your standard of judgment within yourself, instead of borrowing it from changing circumstances. Approval becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Criticism becomes informative rather than devastating. Success becomes an opportunity for gratitude rather than arrogance. Failure becomes instruction rather than humiliation. This freedom cannot be purchased through comfort or praise. It must be earned through daily practice. Every morning choose reason before pride has an opportunity to speak. Every afternoon examine the judgments directing your emotions. Every evening correct the habits that weakened your self-command. These ordinary disciplines gradually produce extraordinary steadiness because they strengthen the one authority no circumstance can rightfully replace. Remember that your greatest opponent is rarely another person. It is the undisciplined tendency within your own mind that constantly seeks validation from what lies outside your control. Defeat that tendency, and many external conflicts lose their power. Leave it unchallenged, and even peaceful circumstances will eventually become sources of unnecessary suffering. Walk into tomorrow with this understanding firmly established. Another person's opinion cannot imprison you unless you accept it as the ruler of your inner life. Another person's disrespect cannot corrupt your character unless you imitate it. Another person's success cannot reduce your worth unless comparison becomes your chosen standard. These freedoms already belong to you. They require only the courage to choose reason each time pride asks to take command. Refuse the quiet slavery that comes from allowing wounded feelings to govern your days. Refuse the endless burden of proving yourself to minds you cannot control. Refuse the habit of measuring your value by changing opinions and passing judgments. Instead, let reason become the steady guide beneath every decision. Let virtue become the measure of every action. Let honest self-examination replace constant self-defense. When you live this way, no insult can truly master you, no praise can corrupt you, and no disappointment can separate you from the freedom that belongs to a mind governed by wisdom rather than wounded pride. Number 9. Discipline your attention toward actions completely within your control. Your attention is the doorway through which your entire life is shaped. Wherever your attention settles, your thoughts begin gathering. Wherever your thoughts gather, your judgments take form. Wherever your judgments take form, your actions follow. If your attention constantly drifts toward what does not belong to your authority, your days will be filled with frustration long before any external hardship arrives. A disciplined life begins not by controlling the world, but by directing attention toward the only field where genuine freedom exists: your own judgments, your own choices, and your own actions. Most suffering begins with misplaced attention rather than difficult circumstances. The mind wanders toward another person's opinions, tomorrow's uncertainties, yesterday's mistakes, or outcomes that have never belonged to its command. It spends hours attempting to govern what refuses to be governed. By the time evening arrives, little energy remains for the responsibilities that were always available. This habit quietly weakens character because attention has been invested where effort cannot produce virtue. Look honestly at your own daily experience. How often have you awakened already thinking about matters no action could immediately improve? Perhaps you worried about another person's decision. Perhaps you replayed an old conversation that cannot be changed. Perhaps you imagined future disappointments that have not yet appeared. While your attention remained occupied by distant possibilities, the present moment waited patiently with work that actually belonged to you. Many people lose today while attempting to manage tomorrow. The disciplined mind understands that attention is never neutral. Every moment spent dwelling upon what lies beyond your authority is a moment withdrawn from what remains entirely within your reach. Your character cannot be strengthened through endless speculation. It grows only through faithful action directed by sound judgment. Therefore, your first responsibility each day is not merely deciding what to do, it is deciding where your attention deserves to remain. Begin every morning with a brief examination before the demands of the day begin speaking loudly. Sit quietly and ask yourself what truly belongs to you today. Your honesty belongs to you. Your patience belongs to you. Your fairness belongs to you. Your willingness to meet each responsibility with reason belongs to you. Then ask what does not belong to you. Other people's opinions do not belong to you. The final outcome of every effort does not belong to you. The behavior of strangers does not belong to you. Once these distinctions become clear, the mind begins its work upon solid ground instead of unstable expectations. Carry this distinction with you throughout the day. Every difficult moment presents the same silent question. Where is your attention resting right now? If it rests upon another person's approval, gently bring it back. If it rests upon uncertain results, return it to present effort. If it rests upon imagined disasters, direct it toward the action immediately available. This repeated return is not weakness, it is discipline. Character is strengthened each time attention willingly leaves what cannot be governed and returns to what can. Notice how quickly the mind invents unnecessary burdens. A single responsibility becomes overwhelming because imagination adds countless future concerns before the first task has even begun. Instead of completing one honest action, attention becomes scattered across possibilities that may never exist. The disciplined person refuses this multiplication of unnecessary weight. They ask only what reason requires now. One faithful action performed with full attention possesses greater value than endless anxiety about events still hidden from view. Many people mistake constant thinking for meaningful progress. They believe that if they worry long enough, they will eventually gain control over uncertain outcomes. Yet worry often repeats the same thoughts without producing wiser judgment. Attention becomes trapped in circles instead of moving toward deliberate action. Examine whether your thinking serves understanding or merely feeds restlessness. If no practical action follows the thought, ask whether your attention has quietly wandered beyond its rightful place. There will be times when another person's behavior attempts to capture your entire mind. Someone criticizes you unfairly. Someone ignores your effort. Someone behaves carelessly. Hours later, you remain mentally tied to the encounter. The conversation has ended, yet your attention continues serving it. Ask yourself what useful purpose this continued occupation accomplishes. Does it improve your character? Does it strengthen your judgment? Does it help you fulfill today's responsibilities? If the answer is no, then you have granted authority to something that cannot improve your life through continued contemplation. The disciplined mind knows when to release what no longer deserves attention. Releasing does not mean pretending events never happened. It means refusing to allow completed events to consume energy needed for present duties. Attention is limited. Every unnecessary attachment reduces your ability to practice virtue where it truly matters. Practice simplifying every challenge into two clear categories. The first contains everything requiring your deliberate action. The second contains everything that remains outside your authority, regardless of desire. This exercise immediately removes confusion because it prevents effort from becoming scattered across impossible objectives. Once your mind clearly recognizes which category an issue belongs to, your next step becomes obvious. Act where action is possible. Accept where action is impossible. Throughout the afternoon, pause briefly and examine your mental direction. Do not ask only what you are doing. Ask what your attention has been feeding. Has it been nourishing resentment? Has it been strengthening fear? Has it been searching endlessly for certainty about matters no one can predict? Or has it been devoted to performing today's responsibilities with honesty and care? These questions reveal whether your inner life serves reason or wandering impulse. Understand that attention naturally follows attachment. If you have attached your happiness to outcomes beyond your authority, your thoughts will continually return there. You will watch for signs of success, fear every possibility of failure, and become exhausted by circumstances refusing complete obedience. To free your attention, first loosen these attachments. Let your deepest commitment become the quality of your own conduct, rather than the uncertainty of external results. This does not mean neglecting responsibilities or abandoning thoughtful planning. Wise planning remains necessary because reason prepares for future action. The difference lies in what happens after preparation is complete. Once you have acted with care, further obsession produces no additional benefit. At that point, your task becomes accepting uncertainty without allowing it to consume your attention. Trust the effort already given, instead of demanding impossible guarantees from the future. There is another subtle habit that deserves careful correction. Many people devote enormous attention to observing faults in others, while neglecting examination of themselves. They become experts concerning another person's weaknesses while remaining strangers to their own. This habit creates the illusion of understanding without producing genuine improvement. Direct your attention inward whenever possible. Your own judgments always offer greater opportunities for growth than another person's mistakes. Each conversation presents another opportunity to practice disciplined attention. Listen carefully instead of preparing arguments while others are still speaking. Attend to what is actually being said rather than what you fear might be implied. Observe your own emotional responses without immediately accepting them as truth. Such attention creates clarity because it allows reason to remain active instead of becoming overwhelmed by assumption. Whenever disappointment appears, examine where your attention was placed before the disappointment arrived. Often you will discover that your expectations had settled upon outcomes never promised by life. You expected gratitude. You expected agreement. You expected success without interruption. Reality simply unfolded according to its own nature. The pain came not from reality itself, but from attention fixed upon expectations that possessed no certainty. Each evening, return quietly to yourself and review the day. Do not merely count completed tasks. Examine the direction of your attention. Where did it remain faithful to reason? Where did it become captured by fear, resentment, or imagined outcomes? Which thoughts deserved continued consideration? Which thoughts quietly stole hours without producing wisdom? Honest answers to these questions gradually retrain the mind, because tomorrow's attention becomes easier to guide. Do not become discouraged when you notice how often your thoughts wander. Wandering attention belongs to an undisciplined habit formed over many years. Patient correction belongs to disciplined living. Every time you recognize distraction and gently return attention to present duty, you strengthen the very capacity you seek. Progress is measured not by never wandering, but by returning more quickly each time you notice the departure. Remember that your attention shapes your emotional life as surely as your judgments shape your actions. If attention continually feeds grievance, grievance grows stronger. If attention repeatedly returns to gratitude for opportunities to practice virtue, steadiness increases. If attention rests upon honest effort instead of uncertain reward, peace gradually becomes less dependent upon external circumstances. What the mind repeatedly observes eventually influences the entire direction of character. There will always be countless invitations to scatter your attention. Endless opinions seek your reaction. Endless uncertainties seek your fear. Endless comparisons seek your insecurity. You cannot prevent these invitations from appearing. You remain entirely responsible for deciding which invitations receive entrance into your inner life. This decision belongs to you every hour of every day. The greatest waste of attention occurs when you repeatedly ask questions that no amount of thinking can answer. Why did they treat me this way? What if everything goes wrong? What if I fail despite my effort? These questions keep the mind circling around uncertainty. Replace them with questions reason can actually use. What action is available now? What judgment requires examination? What virtue deserves practice in this moment? These questions lead toward freedom because they direct attention where deliberate choice remains possible. As this discipline grows stronger, your life begins feeling less divided. Instead of being pulled in every direction by changing circumstances, your attention develops a steady center. You become less fascinated by what lies beyond your influence and more devoted to perfecting what lies within it. This quiet transformation changes every part of daily living. Work becomes more focused because attention remains with the task rather than wandering toward imagined outcomes. Relationships become calmer because you stop demanding control over another person's inner world. Difficult moments become more manageable because your mind immediately searches for present responsibilities instead of impossible guarantees. Carry this understanding into tomorrow before the first distraction appears. Guard your attention with the same seriousness that a wise person guards precious resources. Once wasted, attention cannot be recovered. Every hour spent feeding unnecessary fear, resentment, or comparison is an hour unavailable for strengthening character. Choose carefully what receives the privilege of occupying your mind. Walk through each day asking one simple question whenever uncertainty appears: what belongs to my authority in this moment? Then devote your full attention to that answer. Let honesty receive your effort. Let patience receive your effort. Let courage receive your effort. Let justice receive your effort. Everything beyond these responsibilities may continue changing according to its own course. You are not called to command the entire world. You are called to govern yourself wisely within it. A life shaped by this discipline becomes remarkably steady because its deepest energy no longer leaks into endless attempts to master what cannot be mastered. Instead, it flows toward choices that build character one decision at a time. There you will discover a freedom that no circumstance can grant and no circumstance can remove. It is the freedom of a mind that has finally learned where its attention truly belongs and refuses to surrender it to anything outside the reach of reason and virtue.
Number 10. Live each encounter with unwavering virtue regardless of others.
Every encounter you face today will attempt to pull you away from your center, not because the world is hostile by nature, but because human behavior is unpredictable, inconsistent, and often guided by impulse rather than reason. If your inner stability depends on others behaving correctly, then you have surrendered your peace before the day has even begun. The disciplined life begins when you decide that no external behavior will be allowed to determine the quality of your own conduct. Virtue does not wait for permission. It does not pause for comfort. It does not adjust itself to match the character of others. It stands firm because it answers only to reason. Most people move through their encounters reacting like mirrors. If someone is harsh, they become harsh. If someone is patient, they become patient. If someone is respectful, they respond with respect. Their character shifts constantly depending on who stands before them. This creates a fragile identity that changes shape with every interaction. Such a life is not governed by principle, it is governed by imitation. And imitation cannot produce freedom because it always depends on something external to define its direction. Look carefully at how often your emotional state has been shaped by the behavior of others. A single rude comment can distort your entire day. A moment of appreciation can temporarily lift your mood. A disagreement can linger in your mind long after it has ended. In each case, your inner world is reacting instead of leading. You are no longer choosing your character. You are allowing circumstances to sculpt it. This is how people gradually lose command of themselves without ever noticing the moment it happened. The Stoic way begins by reversing this order completely. Instead of letting encounters shape your virtue, you bring your virtue into every encounter fully formed. You do not enter situations hoping they will be easy. You enter them prepared to remain just, calm, and rational regardless of how they unfold. This preparation changes everything because it removes the illusion that peace depends on cooperation from others. Peace depends only on your ability to remain faithful to reason while others act without it. Each morning you must remind yourself that you will meet people who are impatient, misinformed, distracted, self-centered, or simply unaware of their own behavior. This is not an exception to life, it is the condition of life. Expecting perfection from others guarantees disappointment before any interaction even begins. Instead of preparing expectations about how others should behave, prepare commitments about how you will behave. Let your standard remain fixed even when everything around you moves unpredictably. When you enter a conversation, notice whether your attention is focused on the other person's conduct or your own. The undisciplined mind constantly evaluates others while neglecting itself. It becomes absorbed in judging tone, attitude, and intention. Meanwhile, it forgets to examine its own reactions, assumptions, and impulses. The disciplined mind reverses this focus. It observes the other person without losing awareness of its own responsibility. It asks not what the other person is becoming, but what it is becoming in response. There will be moments when you are treated unfairly. Someone will misunderstand your intentions. Someone will dismiss your effort. Someone will act without considering your perspective. In these moments, your character is not tested by their behavior, but by your response to it. If you allow their conduct to dictate your own, then you have quietly handed over authority that belongs only to you. Virtue is not proven when others are reasonable, it is proven when they are not. A central discipline of this way of living is learning to separate impression from judgment. An encounter will always produce an initial emotional reaction. That reaction is not your final position, it is only raw material. The critical moment comes afterward when you decide whether to accept that reaction as truth or to examine it through reason. If you immediately accept emotional impressions as commands, you become reactive. If you pause and evaluate them, you become free. During the day, practice returning repeatedly to one simple question. What does reason require of me right now? Not what does pride want. Not what does emotion demand. Not what does approval seek. Only reason. This question strips away unnecessary noise because it directs attention toward what remains within your control. You cannot control how others interpret your actions, but you can control whether your actions remain just. You cannot control whether others act wisely, but you can control whether you respond wisely. Many conflicts begin when people confuse their standards with universal expectations. They believe others should behave according to their own internal rules. When reality refuses to comply, frustration arises. Yet no law of nature guarantees that others will reflect your values. The only guarantee available to you is the ability to uphold those values yourself, regardless of circumstance. Once this is understood, disappointment loses much of its force because it is no longer rooted in false expectations. Each interaction becomes an opportunity to practice consistency, not consistency in outcome, but consistency in principle. Whether you are praised or criticized, included or ignored, supported or opposed, your commitment remains the same. Act with fairness. Speak with honesty. Respond with restraint. These principles do not change depending on audience or environment. They remain stable because they are anchored in reason, not reaction. You must also become aware of how quickly emotional contamination spreads during encounters. Another person's anger can easily trigger your own. Their anxiety can infiltrate your thinking. Their arrogance can provoke your defensiveness. If you are not attentive, you begin unconsciously imitating the very behavior you internally disapprove of. This is why self-awareness is essential. You are not only responsible for your actions, but also for what you allow yourself to absorb and reproduce. When tension arises in a conversation, slow your internal pace. Do not rush to match the emotional speed of the situation. Speed belongs to impulse. Clarity belongs to restraint. By slowing your response, you create space for reason to reassert itself. In that space, you can choose whether speaking, remaining silent, or redirecting the conversation serves virtue. Without that space, reaction chooses for you. There is a subtle form of pride that appears when you believe your behavior should influence others immediately. You speak not to express truth, but to produce agreement. You act not to uphold principle, but to achieve recognition. When others fail to respond as expected, frustration appears. This reveals attachment not to virtue itself, but to its reception. The disciplined mind removes this attachment. It acts rightly regardless of whether the result is understood, accepted, or appreciated. Throughout the day, remind yourself that every encounter is temporary, but your character is continuous. The conversation will end, the disagreement will fade, the moment will pass. What remains is the quality of how you conducted yourself within it. This perspective reduces the urgency to control outcomes and increases attention toward maintaining integrity within each moment as it arises. At times you will notice that remaining virtuous in difficult situations feels like a loss. You may feel that others have gained something while you have remained restrained. This perception comes from measuring success externally rather than internally. If success is defined by controlling others, then frustration becomes inevitable. If success is defined by controlling yourself, then every encounter becomes an opportunity rather than a threat. Even when others act unjustly, your response does not need to reflect their disorder. Justice does not require imitation of injustice to correct it. Calm firmness is often more effective than emotional escalation because it preserves clarity while addressing wrongdoing. When necessary, you can set boundaries, withdraw from harmful situations, or speak firmly. Yet all of these actions must emerge from reasoned judgment, not emotional reaction. At the end of each day, reflect not on how others behaved, but on how faithfully you maintained your principles in their presence. Did impatience enter your responses? Did resentment shape your interpretation? Did pride influence your words? Or did you remain steady in your commitment to fairness and self-control? This reflection is not about guilt, it is about refinement. Each honest observation becomes guidance for tomorrow. You will gradually notice a shift in how encounters affect you. People will still behave unpredictably. Situations will still vary, yet your inner condition will no longer be fully dependent on these variations. You begin to experience a quiet independence that does not rely on external agreement. This is not emotional detachment from life. It is freedom from being ruled by it. As this discipline strengthens, something unexpected occurs. You become less focused on how others treat you and more focused on how you treat them. Your attention shifts from seeking fairness to practicing it, from seeking respect to embodying it, from seeking understanding to offering clarity. This reversal marks the beginning of genuine philosophical living. Remember that virtue is not proven in isolation. It is revealed in contact with imperfection. Anyone can appear calm in a peaceful environment. The true measure of character appears when peace is disturbed. Each encounter with disorder becomes a training ground for stability. Each interaction becomes a chance to practice what reason has taught you in theory. Carry this understanding into every future moment. Do not measure your success by how smoothly others behave. Measure it by how consistently you remain aligned with reason when they do not. Let every encounter remind you that your task is not to control the world around you, but to govern the world within you. When you live in this way, encounters lose their power to disturb your identity. They become situations to navigate rather than forces that define you. You remain steady not because life has become easier, but because your commitment to virtue no longer depends on ease. And in that steadiness, you discover a freedom that no external behavior can take away, the freedom of a mind that chooses reason in every encounter, regardless of what others choose.